Left humiliated at the altar with the world watching, a millionaire CEO vanished without a trace, until he returned, proudly holding hands with the last woman anyone expected, his ex-fiancee's shy black sister. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The air in the grand cathedral hummed with an expectant silence, broken only by the soft rustle of silk and the hushed whispers of the assembled elite. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting kaleidoscopic patterns across the marble floor, illuminating a scene straight out of a billionaire's fairy tale. At the altar stood Alexander Vance, the titan of Vance Industries, a man whose name was synonymous with power, ambition, and unimaginable wealth. Today, however, his usual aura of steely control was softened by a rare vulnerability, his eyes fixed on the long aisle where his bride would soon appear. Isabella Sterling was every inch the society darling, beautiful, sophisticated, and the perfect complement to Alexander's formidable presence. Their wedding was the social event of the decade, live-streamed, photographed, and dissected by millions around the globe. Every camera in the room was pointed towards the heavy oak doors as the first notes of the processional swelled, anticipation reaching a fever pitch. Then she appeared, Isabella. More stunning than the countless magazine covers had promised, a vision in a custom-designed gown that shimmered with thousands of hand-sewn pearls. A collective sigh swept through the congregation. Alexander's chest tightened with a mixture of adoration and relief. He had conquered markets, brokered impossible deals, survived hostile takeovers, but waiting for this woman, for this moment, felt like the most pivotal negotiation of his life. He straightened his tie, a small, nervous gesture unseen by most, but noticed by those who knew the man beneath the myth. The doors swung shut behind her, sealing her in, sealing him in, with their destiny and the gaze of the watching world. Her father, the distinguished Senator Sterling, walked beside her, his face a mask of paternal pride. They moved with stately grace down the aisle, past rows of envious guests, towards the man who held their future and Isabella's in his hands. As they reached the altar, Senator Sterling placed Isabella's hand in Alexander's. Her hand felt cool, almost detached, but Alexander attributed it to nerves. He offered her a reassuring smile, which she returned with a practiced, brittle grace. The minister began the ceremony, his voice resonating through the cathedral, speaking of love, commitment, and forever. Alexander listened, his gaze rarely leaving Isabella. He felt a profound sense of rightness about this moment, the culmination of months of whirlwind courtship, expensive gifts, and strategic merging of dynasties. He had chosen Isabella not just for her beauty and pedigree, but because he believed in his way that she fit perfectly into the life he had built, the legacy he intended to leave. When the minister reached the vows, the air thickened. Alexander, do you take Isabella? The familiar words hung in the air. Alexander's response was ready, etched into his mind since long before the proposal. He looked into Isabella's eyes, expecting to see reflected there the same commitment, the same future he envisioned. But something was different. Her smile had vanished, replaced by a cool, unnerving stillness. The minister turned to Isabella. Isabella, do you take Alexander? A beat of silence, a beat too long, a cough somewhere in the crowd. Alexander's smile faltered. What was happening? Isabella's voice, usually so melodic and charming, cut through the quiet like a sharp, unexpected sound. It was clear, strong, and utterly devoid of warmth. No, she said. The single word seemed to detonate in the hushed sanctuary. Alexander's blood ran cold. No, he repeated, a bewildered whisper caught by the sensitive altar microphones and broadcast to the world. Isabella met his gaze, and now her eyes held a chilling triumph, utterly alien to the woman he thought he knew. No, Alexander, she repeated, louder this time, ensuring everyone heard. "I do not. This farce is over." The cathedral erupted. A collective gasp, followed by shocked murmurs that quickly escalated into an astonished uproar. Cameras flashed wildly. Zoom lenses suddenly focused on the scene of unfolding disaster rather than fairy tale union. Isabella calmly pulled her hand from Alexander's, the movement slow and deliberate, an almost theatrical gesture of final rejection. She turned not to her father or the minister, but directly to a man standing in the front pew, Marcus Thorne, Alexander's most cunning and relentless business rival. Marcus offered her a small, smirking smile. "But why?" Alexander stammered, his mind reeling, his carefully constructed world collapsing around him. The humiliation was a physical blow, a white-hot wave of shame washing over him under the glare of 1,000 eyes, 1,000 cameras. He was Alexander Vance, the man who always won, being publicly, brutally rejected at the altar he had paid millions to stand at. Isabella took a step towards Marcus. "Why, Alexander?" she echoed, her voice dripping with disdain. "Did you really think I loved you? You bought this wedding, just like you buy everything else, but you couldn't buy me. You were a means to an end, Alexander, a stepping stone, and now I have what I need." She gestured subtly toward Senator Sterling, whose face was now a mask of horror mixed with fury directed at her. "My family's political future is secured, Alexander. Your connections, your influence, I leverage them perfectly. And Marcus has offered something far more valuable than anything you ever could." Marcus stood up, his expression smug. "Isabella Sterling, soon to be Isabella Thorne," he announced, his voice amplified as he stepped forward. "A much more fitting alliance, wouldn't you agree, Alexander? The Sterling name united with the rising power of Thorne Enterprises? Vance Industries will find itself suddenly very isolated. This wedding was a strategic maneuver, Alexander, one you were too arrogant to see coming." Alexander stood frozen, the minister speechless, the senator apoplectic, the entire congregation a tableau of stunned disbelief. The woman he was about to marry, the woman he had trusted with his name, his future, had orchestrated a public spectacle of his downfall, using their wedding, their sacred vows, as the platform for a business coup live-streamed to the world. It was a betrayal of staggering proportions, a humiliation designed for maximum global impact. He didn't speak, didn't react beyond that initial involuntary stammer, his mind racing, processing the raw, brutal data points. Betrayal, public annihilation, ruin. The whispers grew louder, feeding like a wildfire. Journalists were scribbling furiously. Phones were out, recording the unprecedented scandal, the sheer, overwhelming weight of the world watching, witnessing his utter defeat, was crushing. He turned slowly, his movements stiff and unnatural. He ignored Isabella, ignored Marcus, ignored the minister and the livid senator. He walked away from the altar, past the first row of gaping faces, his eyes seeing nothing, his ears hearing only the roaring in his head, a terrifying mix of the crowd's clamor and the sound of his own heart breaking into jagged pieces. He walked down the aisle he had watched his bride walk up just moments before, each step a heavy, agonizing echo of his failure. He reached the grand oak doors at the back of the cathedral. Hands reached out, some in misplaced pity, some in morbid curiosity, but he brushed past them. The heavy doors swung open, revealing the busy New York street outside. He stepped out of the hallowed, now defiled space and into the harsh reality of the day. The sounds of the city rushed in, a stark contrast to the stunned silence he left behind. He didn't look back. He didn't pause. Alexander Vance, the man who owned the city, was now a man stripped bare, his very identity shattered in front of everyone. He merged with the flow of pedestrians on the sidewalk, a dark, solitary figure swallowed by the urban tide. He disappeared. The search began almost immediately. Initially, people assumed he had merely retreated to lick his wounds, perhaps on his private island or aboard his super yacht. But days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Alexander Vance had vanished without a trace. His phone was found abandoned in a trash receptacle miles from the cathedral. His driver hadn't seen him since dropping him off hours before the wedding. His security detail had lost sight of him in the post-ceremony chaos. It was as if the earth had simply swallowed him whole. Speculation ran rampant. Suicide was the most talked-about possibility. The public humiliation, the business implications of Isabella's alliance with Thorne. It was enough to break even a man like Alexander Vance, or so the pundits claimed. Others suggested he had staged his disappearance, a clever tactic to regroup and seek revenge. Perhaps he was plotting his comeback from some hidden lair, ready to strike when the time was right. Conspiracy theories flourished. He had been kidnapped by rivals, spirited away by secret government agencies, or perhaps he was living a simple life under a new identity somewhere far from the prying eyes of the world. Vance Industries, a sprawling empire built on Alexander's sheer will and intellect, found itself in turmoil. Share prices plummeted initially, then stabilized as the board scrambled to install interim leadership. Marcus Thorne, meanwhile, consolidated his new power. His acquisition of key Sterling family assets accelerated by his alliance with Isabella. The name Alexander Vance became a cautionary tale, a fleeting headline replaced by the next scandal, the next rise of a ruthless competitor. Isabella Sterling, now Isabella Thorne, became a figure of controversy, admired by some for her audacious move, reviled by many others for her calculated cruelty. She seemed unfazed, walking hand in hand with Marcus at society events, her smile as perfect and brittle as ever. The world moved on, leaving the mystery of Alexander Vance's fate unanswered. During this time, Isabella's sister quietly observed the unfolding drama. Maya Sterling was the antithesis of her older sister. Where Isabella was radiant and used to the spotlight, Maya was reserved, almost shy. Where Isabella effortlessly navigated the circles of wealth and power, Maya preferred the solitude of libraries and small, unpretentious coffee shops. Their relationship was complicated, marked by the vast differences in their personalities and life experiences. Maya, introverted and sensitive, often felt overshadowed by Isabella's dazzling presence, a shadow she sometimes welcomed for the anonymity it provided. Described simply as Isabella's shy black sister, a detail that set her apart physically and perhaps socially from the predominantly white privileged Sterling world that Isabella embodied, Maya moved through life with a quiet grace, her intelligence often hidden beneath a veneer of unassuming politeness. Maya had been at the wedding, not in the front row despite her relation to the bride, but seated further back, a deliberate choice or perhaps an unconscious reflection of her place within the family's hierarchy. She had watched the stunning ceremony begin, felt the collective breath-holding as Isabella walked down the aisle, and then witnessed the horrific, agonizing spectacle of her sister's rejection of Alexander Vance. She didn't gasp like the others. She didn't whisper or reach for her phone. She simply sat, frozen, her heart aching with a complex mix of emotions. Embarrassment for Isabella's cruelty, certainly, but also a strange pang of sympathy for the man standing alone at the altar, his vulnerability so raw and exposed. She had met Alexander a few times during the engagement, fleeting encounters where he was always polite, if preoccupied. She hadn't known him well enough to form a strong opinion, but she had seen glimpses of a driven, perhaps lonely man behind the CEO facade. As the wedding dissolved into chaos, Maya slipped away, unnoticed, as was her habit. She didn't attend the frantic family meetings, didn't participate in the rampant speculation about Alexander's fate. While the world dissected the scandal and Isabella paraded her new alliance with Marcus, Maya retreated further into her quiet life. The image of Alexander Vance's stunned face at the altar etched into her memory. The memory lingered, a persistent melancholic image in the backdrop of her quiet world, a world where billionaire CEOs and scandalous betrayals felt unimaginably distant. She heard the theories, the rumors, the morbid predictions. She wondered sometimes what had really happened to him. Months turned into a year, then two. The name Alexander Vance faded from the daily headlines, relegated to financial history archives and gossip column retrospectives. Vance Industries restructured, successfully navigated the storm, and under new leadership even began to thrive again, albeit without the same audacious flair that Alexander had embodied. Isabella and Marcus Thorne were now a power couple, their combined influence formidable, their public appearances a constant reminder of the ruthless ambition that had propelled them to the top. The incident at the cathedral became a notorious anecdote, a historical footnote in the relentless march of power and ambition. Then, 3 years and 7 months after he had vanished, Alexander Vance returned. It wasn't a grand, orchestrated reappearance, no press conference, no dramatic walk into a boardroom. His return was quiet, almost mundane, yet the effect it had on the watching world was anything but. It happened at a major charity gala, one of the most exclusive events of the year, attended by all the familiar faces of the city's elite, including Isabella and Marcus Thorne. The air in the ballroom was thick with polite chatter and the clinking of champagne flutes. Isabella, radiant in emerald green, was holding court with a group of influential guests, Marcus at her side when a ripple went through the crowd near the entrance. Whispers started, tentative at first, then growing louder, more insistent. Heads turned. Conversations faltered. A hush began to spread from the entrance towards the center of the room, a silence born of sheer, stunned disbelief. Isabella paused, a slight frown creasing her brow. What was happening? Everyone was looking towards the entrance. And then she saw him, Alexander Vance. Looking different, somehow. Thinner, perhaps, or maybe it was just the lines etched around his eyes, lines that hadn't been there 3 years ago. But it was unmistakably him. The powerful bone structure, the familiar intensity in his gaze, though now there was something else there too, something unreadable, calm yet formidable. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo. Instead, he wore a beautifully tailored suit in a dark, unconventional shade, simple yet undeniably expensive. But it wasn't just his presence that stopped conversations and dropped jaws. He wasn't alone. At his side, holding his hand, was a woman everyone present sort of knew peripherally, but no one ever really saw. A woman who belonged to their world by association but never truly inhabited it. A woman who was the living embodiment of the word unlikely in this context. It was Maya Sterling, Isabella's shy black sister. The shock was palpable. It hung in the air like a physical weight, heavier than the most luxurious chandeliers overhead. People didn't just stare, they gaped. Isabella's perfect smile vanished instantly, her face freezing in a mask of utter, unadulterated shock and disbelief. Marcus Thorne's confident demeanor wavered for a fraction of a second, his eyes narrowing in surprise and something that looked dangerously like unease. Alexander Vance, the vanished, humiliated CEO, stood tall and composed, his hand clasped firmly around Maya Sterling's. Maya, the shy, quiet sister, wasn't looking down or shrinking back as she usually did in such settings. She walked beside him with quiet dignity, her head held high, a small, serene smile gracing her lips. She looked beautiful, transformed, in a simple yet elegant dress that complemented her dark skin and framed her serene face. They walked into the ballroom not like gatecrashers but like hosts returning to a party that had gone on too long in their absence. Alexander's gaze swept over the crowded room, meeting the stunned stares, the gaping mouths, the rapidly whispering clusters of people. His expression was calm, unreadable. There was no apology in his eyes, no explanation offered in his posture. He was simply here, back, and with her. The silence, which had fallen like a shroud, was shattered by a single sharp sound. a champagne flute hitting the marble floor, shattering into 1,000 pieces, a perfect metaphor for the scene unfolding before them. The world had watched him be broken at the altar. Now, the world watched him return, seemingly rebuilt, and holding hands with the last person anyone could have ever predicted. The story of Alexander Vance, the ruined CEO, had just taken a turn nobody saw coming. The collective intake of breath was audible, a wave that started at the entrance and rippled outwards, freezing conversations mid-sentence and suspending champagne flutes in mid-air. Never in the history of society galas, events meticulously choreographed to maintain a veneer of effortless perfection, had anything so jarring, so utterly unexpected, occurred. Alexander Vance, the ghost of boardrooms past, the subject of countless whispered theories and morbid jokes, had reappeared, not with the calculated drama many had anticipated, but with a quiet, almost understated entrance, and with Maya Sterling. The soft murmur that followed the initial shock wasn't just surprise, it was a symphony of question marks. Why her? Isabella Sterling's younger sister, the quiet one, the one who seemed to actively avoid the glare of the spotlight her family's name attracted. The contrast was stark, bewildering, and utterly captivating. All eyes were glued to them as they moved further into the room, seemingly oblivious to the storm of speculation and shock they had unleashed. Isabella, whose initial shock had been a raw, physical reaction, quickly regained her composure, though the mask she adopted was thinner than usual. Her eyes, usually bright and sparkling, were now sharp and cold, darting between Alexander and her sister with venomous intensity. She took a small, involuntary step towards them, her hand tightening around Marcus Thorne's arm. Marcus, ever the strategist, recovered just as quickly. His face, a moment before etched with surprise, settled into a look of intense scrutiny, his gaze calculating Alexander, assaying this unforeseen obstacle, this wild card thrown into the game he thought he had already won. He leaned closer to Isabella, murmuring something urgent that was lost in the rising tide of murmurs that now filled the ballroom. Isabella nodded, her jaw tight, her eyes still fixed on the approaching pair. Alexander, however, seemed unperturbed by the maelstrom of attention. He moved with the same measured confidence that had defined him in the financial world, perhaps even more so now. He didn't rush, didn't avert his gaze. His eyes calmly met the stares, acknowledging the shock but not dwelling on it. And by his side, Maya, usually so retiring, walked with a quiet grace. Her hand in his seemed to anchor them together, a visible declaration of their bond amidst the chaos. There was a subtle shift in her posture, a newfound strength in the way she carried herself. Her briefcases and quiet libraries felt miles away tonight, replaced by a presence that, while not loud or demanding, was undeniably significant. The shy sister was here, on the arm of the missing billionaire, and she was no longer shrinking into the background. As they navigated the crowded room, a path seemed to open before them, guests moving aside as if by instinct, some offering tentative smiles, most simply too astonished to react. Alexander offered brief, polite nods to acquaintances, a faint curve to his lips suggesting amusement at the spectacle he was creating. Maya offered quiet, serene smiles in return, her eyes holding a gentle warmth that seemed directed solely at him. It was a partnership, this entrance, a performance deliberately orchestrated to land with maximum impact. "Alexander, is that really you?" A woman with an elaborate updo, a fixture on the charity circuit and the purveyor of exquisite gossip, finally found her voice, though it cracked slightly with disbelief. Alexander stopped, turning slightly towards her. His smile broadened fractionally. "Helena," he said, his voice calm, resonant, utterly familiar. "It's good to see you, though perhaps this isn't quite the reunion I expected." He gestured vaguely around the room, encompassing the stunned faces, the tense silence. Before Helena could formulate another question, fueled by years of professional curiosity and personal delight in high society drama, Another person stepped forward, a minor industrialist, someone who owed Vance Industries a significant favor from years past. "Mr. Vance, we thought—" "I know what you thought, Robert," Alexander interrupted gently, his eyes holding a knowing glint. "But as you can see, I am perfectly well and have been rather busy." Busy? The word hung in the air. What could Alexander Vance, the man who had seemingly dissolved into thin air, have been busy doing for 3.5 years? The questions were screaming in the minds of everyone present, none louder than those in Isabella's and Marcus's. They were too far across the room to hear the brief exchange clearly, but they could see Alexander talking, smiling, seemingly at ease. Maya remained by his side, her presence a silent, infuriating enigma. Isabella gripped Marcus's arm tighter. "What is she doing with him?" she hissed, her voice low and furious. "Maya never goes anywhere. She hates these things. And why is she holding his hand like that? It's improper." The very idea of her younger sister, the quiet, bookish one, in a romantic entanglement with Alexander Vance, the man she had publicly destroyed, was not just shocking, it was personally insulting. Marcus watched Alexander, his expression unreadable. "This changes things," he muttered, more to himself than to Isabella. "A public return, unexpected, and with the sister. A calculated move, Isabella. He's not just back, he's making a statement." His mind was already spinning, analyzing the implications for Thorne Enterprises, for their consolidated power. Alexander Vance hadn't been defeated. He had just gone underground, and returning with Maya added a layer of complexity he hadn't foreseen. Why Maya? Was she a pawn, or something more? As Alexander and Maya slowly made their way deeper into the ballroom, they finally reached the general vicinity of Isabella and Marcus. The air crackled with unspoken tension, the surrounding guests suddenly finding the canapes and their shoes fascinating objects of study, creating a small, tense bubble around the four of them. Alexander stopped a few feet away, his expression polite, almost detached, as if greeting distant acquaintances at a garden party. "Isabella, Marcus," he said, his voice even. There was no heat, no accusation in his tone, which somehow made it more unnerving. Isabella stepped forward, her facade firmly in place, though the effort cost her. "Alexander," she said, her voice coolly controlled. "What a surprise. We thought you were—" She trailed off, the unspoken accusation hanging in the air. Alexander smiled, a slow, almost predatory smile that touched his eyes with a dangerous spark. "Missing," he finished for her. "Yes, I suppose the world was led to believe that. But one finds clarity away from the noise, doesn't one? 3 years and some months of peace can do wonders for the perspective." His gaze flickered to Marcus. "And away from the constant striving, the backstabbing. Refreshing, really." Marcus met his gaze, his usual confidence challenged by Alexander's unnerving composure. "A long time to be away, Alexander," Marcus said, his voice low and measured. "Vance Industries has managed quite well in your absence, I assure you. The market doesn't wait for anyone." "Indeed," Alexander agreed smoothly, "but markets can be influenced, directed, especially when one understands the underlying currents, the hidden leverage points." His eyes lingered on Marcus for a moment before shifting back to Isabella, settling on the hand she still held intertwined with his own. "And some assets prove to be far more valuable than initially assessed. Wouldn't you agree, Isabella?" He gently squeezed Maya's hand as he spoke. Isabella's eyes narrowed, her carefully constructed mask threatening to shatter. The implication, the audacity of bringing Maya here, of touching her sister like that, was unbearable. "What is the meaning of this, Alexander?" she demanded, her voice sharper now. "And Maya? What are you doing?" Maya stepped forward slightly, her hold on Alexander's hand firm. For the first time that night, she spoke, her voice quiet but clear, carrying a surprising strength. "I'm with Alexander, Isabella," she said simply. Her gaze met her sister's, and for a moment, the years of unspoken complexities between them, the subtle slights, the inherent distance, played out in silent confrontation. He needed a friend when he was finding his clarity, as he said, and I needed peace. We found that together. Peace? Alexander Vance? The man who thrived on conflict and dominated every room he was in? The idea seemed ludicrous. Yet, looking at them together, at Alexander's quiet confidence and Maya's serene strength, it was impossible to simply dismiss it. "A friend?" Marcus scoffed, a flicker of his usual arrogance returning. "Please, Maya, don't play coy. Alexander doesn't collect friends, he collects assets. What did he promise you? A share of the scraps he has left?" Alexander's smile didn't falter, but the temperature around them seemed to drop several degrees. "Marcus, you always did project your own motivations onto others," he said softly, dangerously. "Perhaps Maya is a more discerning judge of character than you are used to dealing with. Or perhaps," his voice dropped slightly, laced with cold steel, "I learned the value of loyalty when it was shown to me unconditionally, without expectation of gain." He looked directly at Isabella when he said this, the unspoken contrast between Maya and her venomous sister hanging heavy in the air. Isabella flinched, as if struck. The implication was clear. Maya had been loyal, she had not. The humiliation of the altar rushed back, exacerbated by the bewildering sight of her shy sister now standing beside the man she had ruined. The narrative she had carefully constructed, that Alexander was defeated, gone, a relic of the past, was crumbling before her eyes. "You think you can just waltz back in after abandoning everything?" Marcus challenged, stepping closer, his voice a low growl only the four of them could hear. "After what you did to Vance Industries? After the scandal? You're finished, Vance. You're a ghost. This little spectacle won't change that." "Oh, Marcus," Alexander said, his tone one of genuine pitying amusement. "You mistake my absence for weakness. I wasn't gone. I was building something stronger, something quieter, something they cannot see coming." He glanced at Maya, and the brief, affectionate look they exchanged spoke volumes, suggesting a shared history, a true connection that went far beyond mere strategy. Maya offered him a small, private smile, a silent acknowledgement of their shared understanding. "Building what?" Isabella demanded, her voice strained. "What could you possibly have built hidden away? You have nothing left. Vance Industries is thriving under new leadership." "Thriving, Isabella?" Alexander raised an eyebrow, a gesture that was once legendary for its ability to instill fear in boardrooms. "Or merely treading water? Perhaps you haven't been paying close enough attention to the market indicators, the shifts in global finance? Or perhaps your new partner's attention has been elsewhere?" He paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "I assure you my time away was productive, very productive, and I have no intention of remaining hidden any longer." A frantic energy pulsed through Isabella. Alexander couldn't be serious. He had no resources, no team, no presence. He was ruined, unless his disappearance had been a clever ruse, unless he had squirreled away assets, built a new network in the shadows. The thought was terrifying. And Maya, who knew nothing of business, nothing of this world, somehow involved. It made no sense. "And Maya?" Isabella pressed, her gaze sharp and accusatory on her sister. "What role does my little sister play in your building? Did you convince her to help you from some hidden bunker?" Maya met her sister's gaze steadily. "Alexander didn't convince me of anything, Isabella," she said, her voice calm, unyielding. "We found each other when we were both lost, and we helped each other. There are things more important than money, than power, Isabella. Things you never understood." The quiet dignity in Maya's voice, the subtle accusation in her words, landed with more force than any outburst. Isabella recoiled as if struck. Maya, the shy, quiet one, daring to judge her. Isabella Sterling, future Mrs. Thorne? It was intolerable. Marcus finally spoke, his voice regaining its hard edge. "Whatever game you're playing, Vance, it won't work. You're a pariah, a public embarrassment. No one serious will touch you." He put a possessive arm around Isabella, pulling her closer. "Stay away from us. Stay away from our family, and keep your distractions away from the city." Alexander's smile widened chillingly. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so that only the four of them could hear. "Distractions, Marcus? You think Maya is a distraction?" His gaze flickered to Maya again, a look of profound tenderness crossing his face before it hardened again. "Perhaps you haven't seen what I've seen, what she has shown me. Perhaps you don't understand the true strength that lies in—" He paused, his eyes scanning the glittering, fragile veneer of the ballroom before returning to the tense faces of Isabella and Marcus. "In quieter spaces, in unexpected alliances, in rebuilding on a foundation far more solid than the one you and Isabella built on deception and betrayal." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. The words, the challenging gaze, the mere fact of his reappearance and Maya's presence by his side were enough. They had disrupted the evening, certainly. But it felt like more than just a social disruption. It felt like a ripple effect, the first tremor of a wave that could potentially dismantle the carefully constructed world Isabella and Marcus had built on Alexander's humiliation from the altar. The ghost had returned, and he wasn't alone. He had brought the quiet sister, and together they exuded a calm, potent power that struck a deep, unsettling fear into the hearts of Isabella and Marcus Thorne. The onlookers, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, the intense, silent battle unfolding before them, began to whisper again. Their voices hushed, their eyes wide with avid curiosity and apprehension about what unforeseen consequences this dramatic return, this impossible pairing, might unleash. The game, it seemed, was far from over. The electric tension Alexander Vance and Maya Sterling brought into the ballroom lingered long after they moved away from the stunned cluster of Isabella and Marcus Thorne. The carefully curated elegance of the gala was momentarily forgotten, replaced by a raw, buzzing energy. Guests strained to follow Alexander and Maya with their eyes as they circulated, a palpable aura of mystery surrounding them. Attempts were made to approach Alexander, tentative hellos and surprised exclamations offered from people who, moments before, had probably been discussing his presumed demise. Alexander handled it with practiced ease, acknowledging greetings, offering brief, non-committal pleasantries, but never lingering. His attention seemed primarily focused on Maya, a quiet attentiveness that was utterly at odds with the ruthless, all-consuming ambition he was known for. Maya, for her part, reciprocated this attention, her eyes often finding his, a silent understanding passing between them that somehow excluded the entire glittering room. Observing them from across the floor, it was clear this was no casual encounter. The way they moved together, the subtle touches, the unspoken communication, it spoke of intimacy, of a shared journey. This wasn't just a strategic alliance for public shock value, or if it was built on something deeper, on a connection forged away from the judgment and expectations of their former lives. Maya's usual reserve hadn't vanished, but it was transformed. Beside Alexander, she didn't seem shy. She seemed private, guarded, her quietness a shield rather than a sign of timidity. Her presence lent Alexander an unexpected grounding, a humanizing element that made him seem simultaneously more approachable and more enigmatic. The rumors started immediately, whispered behind cupped hands over expensive cocktails. Had he been in hiding with her all this time? Had she known where he was? Was this a love story? Or the most elaborate revenge plot ever conceived? And how on earth had Maya Sterling, the invisible sister, become the linchpin in the return of the vanished billionaire? Maya guided them subtly towards a less crowded area near the large bay windows overlooking the city lights. Once there, away from the most intense scrutiny, Alexander turned to her, his expression softening. He released her hand, only to lightly touch her arm. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low just for her. "That was quite a splash," Maya finished, a genuine smile touching her lips. "Yes, I'm all right, Alexander. A little overwhelmed, perhaps, but all right." She met his gaze, and the years of shared solitude, of mutual support, flickered between them. They were certainly surprised. "Surprised isn't the word," Alexander chuckled softly, a sound rarely heard in public during his Vance Industries days. "Utterly blindsided seems more accurate, especially Isabella and Marcus." His eyes hardened slightly as he glanced back towards where his ex-fiancée and rival stood, now engaged in what looked like a heated, hushed argument. "They built their castle on what they thought was my grave. It must be unsettling to see the supposed ghost walk among the living." "It was important that we did this, wasn't it?" Maya asked, her voice thoughtful. "Not just to announce the return," Alexander confirmed, his gaze drifting out to the city lights, the empire he had once commanded, "but to signal intent, to show them I'm not broken, not defeated, and that I'm not alone. They underestimated me once, Isabella, and they certainly underestimated you." He looked back at Maya, his eyes filled with a quiet respect, a profound appreciation. "You were my anchor, Maya, my perspective. Without you—" He trailed off, the unspoken difficulty of his years in hiding hinted at. He didn't elaborate on where or how they had spent their time, what challenges they had faced, what secrets the past 3.5 years held. Not yet. The time for those reveals would come. For now, their presence together was the message. Meanwhile, across the room, Isabella and Marcus were reeling. The calm confidence Alexander exuded, coupled with Maya's unexpected poise, gnawed at them. "How?" Isabella repeated for the 10th time, her voice a tight, furious whisper. "How is he back? And with her? The meek little mouse hiding behind her books?" Marcus was already on his phone, his sharp mind discarding the initial shock and moving straight to damage control and intelligence gathering. "It doesn't matter how he's back right now, Isabella. What matters is why, and what he's been doing. He said he's been building. That's not just talk, not Alexander. He didn't disappear for 3 years just to reappear at a party for show." He barked orders into his phone, arranging for discreet inquiries, background checks, anything to uncover Alexander's activities and resources during his vanishing act. His vast network, built on power and intimidation, was already being mobilized. His first priority: find out everything about Maya Sterling's connection to Alexander Vance. "Building what?" Isabella scoffed, though a tremor of fear ran beneath her anger. He had nothing when he left. His assets were frozen, his reputation ruined. What could he build without capital, without connections? "That's what worries me," Marcus admitted, lowering his phone. "Alexander Vance is never without resources for long, and if he's operating outside the conventional system, that's harder to track, harder to fight. And Maya Sterling, we know nothing about her real life, Isabella. Not her social circles, not her habits, not her connections outside of this." He gestured around the gala, a world Maya had always seemed a reluctant visitor to. "If she was hiding him, she must have a world of her own we're not aware of, a world beneath our radar." He looked at Isabella, his eyes cold and calculating. "Find out about your sister, Isabella. Every contact she has made, every trip she has taken, every penny she has spent that wasn't from her small allowance. Dig deep. She's the key to understanding his disappearance, and likely his return." Isabella felt a wave of nauseous dread mixed with burning resentment. Maya, her quiet sister, suddenly a figure of such strategic importance? It defied everything she thought she knew. But Marcus was right. Alexander wasn't here for a simple social commentary. This was a calculated move on a very large chessboard, and Maya somehow was now a major player. The thought was galling, unbearable. She would use every resource at her disposal to uncover Maya's secrets, to understand how her own sister had become involved with the man she had publicly scorned. They didn't stay long after their confrontation with Isabella and Marcus. Their appearance served its purpose, to announce their return and sow seeds of doubt and fear. As they left the gala, slipping out as quietly as they entered, the buzz they left behind was deafening. The moment they exited the cathedral 3 years ago had dominated headlines for weeks. Their entrance and exit from the gala tonight promised similar, if not greater, media frenzy. The story had just gone from vanished billionaire to returned billionaire and his mysterious companion. The next morning, the city woke up to their faces on every news portal, every social media feed. The headline that captured the collective shock fastest proclaimed, "Back from the dead? Alexander Vance returns to shock society, arm in arm with ex-fiancée's sister." Photographs plastered across front pages showed Alexander, composed and formidable, and Maya, serene and dignified, together. The contrast between Isabella Sterling, the glamorous, ruthless society figure, and her quiet, introverted sister Maya was dissected endlessly. Analysts speculated wildly on Alexander's financial status, his plans, the implications of his return for Vance Industries and Thorne Enterprises. But the most fervent speculation revolved around Maya. Who was she, really? What had she been doing? How had she connected with Alexander Vance when everyone else thought he was gone? Later that morning, cocooned in the quiet elegance of a discreet, anonymous apartment overlooking a different part of the city than his old penthouse, Alexander and Maya shared a pot of coffee. The apartment was minimalist, functional, devoid of the opulent displays that characterized the homes of the city's elite. It felt like a temporary space, designed for purpose rather than comfort. Maya scrolled through the online articles, a small smile playing on her lips. "We certainly gave them something to talk about," she murmured. "That was the idea," Alexander said, sitting opposite her, watching her with an expression that was both protective and admiring. He looked different in the relaxed setting, the sharp edges softened slightly, the lines of tension around his eyes visible but counterbalanced by a new calmness. His time away hadn't just been about building empires. It had reshaped the man himself. "They're already digging into my life, you know," Maya said, meeting his gaze. "Senator Sterling will be furious. Isabella will be relentless." "I know," Alexander responded calmly. "Let them. They won't find what they're looking for in your public records, your old school transcripts, or your credit card statements." He paused, taking a sip of his coffee. "Your real life, Maya, the one you built outside their gilded cage, is invisible to them. That's been your strength, and now it's ours." He didn't detail what that real life entailed, what resources Maya might possess. Again, the mystery was part of the strategy. "What about what you were building?" Maya asked, her voice lower. "Are we ready for them to find out? For Marcus to try and dismantle it?" Alexander leaned back, a flicker of that old, dangerous spark returning to his eyes. "What I built was deliberately off their grid, diversified, decentralized. Invisible assets, unconventional investments, a network of people loyal for reasons that don't involve stock options or social climbing." He didn't name the assets, the investments, or the people. The details remained in the shadows, making his return all the more potent and terrifying to his rivals. He had used his time away not just for introspection or recovery, but for meticulous, calculated preparation outside the system that had tried to break him. "But they'll come for us," Maya stated, not as a question but a certainty. "Marcus and Isabella won't rest until they understand what we're planning and try to stop it." "Let them come," Alexander said, his voice firm, filled with a quiet resolve. "We anticipated this. Their predictable desperation is our greatest asset. While they're busy scrambling, trying to uncover the secrets of the last 3 years, we'll be focused on the future, on the next move. He looked at Maya, his expression softening once more. We're in this together, Maya, every step of the way. Are you ready? Maya reached across the table, taking his hand. Her touch was steady, reassuring. Ready, she confirmed. The quiet woman who had always lived in the shadows was stepping into the light, not as an accessory to the returned billionaire, but as his partner. The humiliation at the altar, the vanishing act, the quiet years in hiding, and the shocking return. It had all led to this moment. Isabella and Marcus thought they were dealing with a ghost seeking simple revenge. They were wrong. They were dealing with a man who had rebuilt himself, found a partner in the most unexpected place, and was ready to reclaim not just his name, but to reshape the landscape he had once been forced to abandon. And the first response from their enemies was already on its way. A notification flashed on a secure tablet nearby, a report intercepted by Alexander's unseen network. Isabella Sterling had just scheduled a private meeting later that day, not with her lawyers or PR team, but with a notorious private investigator known for his ruthlessness and discretion. The hunt for Alexander and Maya's secrets had officially begun. The aftershocks of Alexander Vance's reappearance reverberated throughout the city's highest echelons. Isabella Sterling, now Isabella Thorne, and her husband Marcus spent the rest of the gala and the entire following day in a state of barely contained panic and furious strategizing. The humiliation of the cathedral, a scar they had carefully hidden beneath layers of success and public appearances, felt raw again, exacerbated by the bewildering sight of Maya of all people, standing confidently by the man Isabella had publicly rejected. The calculated move to ally the Sterling name with Thorne Enterprises, designed to isolate and dismantle Alexander Vance's influence, now seemed dangerously premature, even foolish. Alexander was not annihilated, he was different. And his companion, the quiet sister, was the variable they could not comprehend, the silent partner that complicated everything. He knows, Isabella whispered, pacing the length of their opulent penthouse living room, the panoramic city lights spread obliviously below them. He saw me. He knows I used him. That little dig about unconditional loyalty. He wasn't talking about us, Marcus. He was talking about Maya. Her voice rose with a frantic edge. My own sister, how could she, after everything? What did he tell her? What did he promise her? She has nothing, Marcus, nothing that could interest a man like Alexander unless she is the something, Marcus finished grimly, sitting back in his chair, his usual alpha confidence replaced by a tense, coiled energy. Unless her lack of public profile, her perceived insignificance, was exactly the cover he needed. Think about it, Isabella. While the world was hunting a vanished billionaire, who would look twice at his ex-fiancée's quiet, bookish sister? No one. She's a ghost in the public eye, perfectly positioned to be invisible. His mind raced, connecting abstract possibilities, discarding conventional explanations. Alexander Vance didn't do things by chance. Every move was calculated. His disappearance, his return, and certainly his choice of companion. The private investigator Marcus had hired, a man named Silas Blackwood, was as discreet as he was ruthless. His reputation was built on uncovering skeletons and burying inconvenient truths, operating in the shadows where the city's elite preferred their dirty work handled. Blackwood arrived later that day, a nondescript figure in a dark suit, his eyes sharp and observant, missing nothing. He listened intently as Marcus and Isabella, struggling to reconcile their public personas with private desperation, laid out the situation. Alexander Vance's disappearance and shocking return. The utter lack of reliable information on his whereabouts for the past 3+ years. The unsettling, inexplicable presence of Maya Sterling. a woman who seemingly had no life outside of occasional family appearances and a modest, easily traceable existence as a freelance researcher. "Find everything," Marcus instructed, his voice low and intense. "Every detail of Alexander Vance's whereabouts, his activities, his resources, every contact he made. And Maya Sterling. I want to know where she's been, who she's been talking to, her financial trails, everything that isn't public knowledge. Her life is deliberately small on paper. That makes her dangerous. Find out why she's with him, find out what she knows, and find out what they are planning." Silas Blackwood simply nodded, absorbing the information, his gaze lingering on Isabella for a moment before turning back to Marcus. "Difficult cases take time, Mr. Thorne," he stated, his voice gravelly, "and often reveal unpleasant truths. Are you prepared for whatever I might find?" "Just find it, Blackwood," Marcus snapped, impatient. The unpleasant truth was already standing in their ballroom, holding Isabella's sister's hand. As Blackwood began his investigation, starting with sifting through the mountains of dusty reports on Alexander Vance's initial disappearance and quietly activating his network of informants and data miners, he quickly hit peculiar obstacles. Alexander Vance, the man whose life had been an open book of public deals, private jet movements, and paparazzi shots, seemed to have genuinely erased himself. Old financial trails simply went cold. Satellite imagery yielded nothing conclusive. Contacts were dead ends or genuinely hadn't seen him. It was frustratingly thorough. But Maya Sterling was even stranger. On the surface, her life was transparently mundane. A small inherited trust fund, rent payments on a modest apartment, utility bills, library late fees, donations to obscure academic charities. Her online presence was minimal, her social media footprint almost non-existent. There were no lavish spending spikes, no sudden travel records to exotic locations that couldn't be explained by a cheap package tour years ago. Her phone records showed calls only to a handful of close, equally unassuming friends, Isabella and her father primarily, and the occasional university contact. It was the digital equivalent of white noise, utterly unremarkable. Yet when Blackwood's team tried to flesh out details, talking to neighbors or casual acquaintances, they encountered a wall of polite, utterly uninformative reports. Maya was described as quiet, kind, kept to herself. No one knew her well. No one knew who she spent time with outside of those few close friends. She traveled sometimes, but always quietly, never advertising it, staying in small guest houses or short-term rentals in seemingly random, unglamorous locations. She didn't flaunt wealth, didn't draw attention. It was less like someone hiding and more like someone who had never wanted to be seen in the first place, a natural state of invisibility amplified by deliberate caution. It unnerved Blackwood. People with secrets usually left some kind of trail, some inconsistency. Maya Sterling's life felt meticulously, almost unnaturally, consistent in its quietness. It was a different kind of challenge than the one Alexander Vance's big data profile presented. Isabella's sister was proving more elusive in her simplicity than the vanished billionaire in his complexity. Meanwhile, Alexander and Maya were not hiding. They were operating. From that minimalist apartment, seemingly anonymous but equipped with state-of-the-art secure communication systems, Alexander was reconnecting with his unseen network. This wasn't the old boys' club of Wall Street he had once dominated. This network was different, built during his time away in places Isabella and Marcus would never think to look. "Silas Blackwood is already asking questions about you, Maya," Alexander said, not looking up from a screen displaying complex data streams. Maya, sitting at a smaller desk nearby, surrounded not by financial reports but by maps and topographical charts, simply nodded. "Expected that. Did he find anything interesting?" "Only the things we allowed him to see," Alexander replied, a faint smile playing on his lips. "A few breadcrumbs designed to lead him nowhere useful. Your public face is still perfectly maintained. No one looking for the shy researcher will find the woman who—" He paused, glancing at her, a shared memory passing between them. "Who navigated a different kind of wilderness? Your anonymity is your shield, Maya. Use it." Their conversations were peppered with cryptic references to their time away, not boardrooms but perhaps remote locations, not trading floors but training grounds or hidden labs. The building Alexander referred to wasn't just financial. It hinted at technological innovation, global connections outside Western financial hubs, and perhaps even the cultivation of unexpected skills. Maya's role wasn't just emotional support. She was actively involved. Her background as a researcher and her ability to blend into the background clearly repurposed for something far more strategic than academic papers. Flashbacks, fleeting but potent, sometimes crossed Alexander's mind as he spoke with Maya. Images of desolate landscapes, not glittering cityscapes. Sounds of nature, not traffic horns. The feeling of air that wasn't filtered and conditioned. And Maya, not in delicate dresses but practical clothing, her hands calloused, her gaze sharp, learning skills far removed from navigating library databases. They hadn't spent 3 years on a secluded beach. They had been in challenging, demanding environments, acquiring knowledge and building connections beyond the reach of the conventional world. Maya's quiet life hadn't been a void. It had been a carefully chosen, intensely focused period of preparation. Blackwood's reports back to Marcus and Isabella grew increasingly frustrating. "Maya Sterling's financial history is cleaner than a monk's," he reported dryly to a fuming Marcus over a secure line. "There are no large transfers, no hidden accounts I can trace. All her expenses fit within her known income. Her travel history shows modest trips, mostly domestic, sometimes wilderness areas. Nothing suspicious on the surface, no expensive hotels, no private rentals that suggest wealth. The woman simply doesn't seem to spend money the way someone hiding a billionaire would." "She's funneling it," Isabella interjected, snatching the phone. "He's using her somehow, sending money to her through channels you can't see." "My team is looking, Ms. Thorne." Blackwood's voice was calm but firm. "We're tracking every fractional movement of funds linked to her name or any known associate. Nothing. And her associates are just as clean. No one with any obvious ties to high finance or anything else. Just quiet, ordinary people. Unless Mr. Vance is paying in untraceable cash for 3 years or using a network I have never seen before, her financial life is exactly what it presents itself to be. This lack of a conventional financial trail, this almost eerie ordinariness of Maya's life, began to twist the knife for Isabella. It contradicted everything she understood about wealth and connection. Maya had always been the one who didn't fit in, who didn't play the game. And now that very detachment, that quiet anonymity, seemed to be her most potent advantage. She hadn't needed Alexander's money during his disappearance, or perhaps she already had access to resources unknown to them. The thought that her shy sister possessed a depth and a network beyond her own understanding was maddening. Marcus listened, his frustration mounting. Blackwood was the best, and he was running into walls. The idea that Alexander Vance had built a parallel operation, funded and perhaps staffed by people outside the conventional elite, people like Maya and her unassuming associates, was a deeply unsettling thought. Their usual tactics of pressure, financial leverage, and public defamation might not apply. "Keep digging, Blackwood," Marcus ordered, his voice cold and hard. "There has to be something. Look into her past, her friends, her time at university. Someone must know something that isn't on paper, and broaden the search for Vance. He must have contacted someone with real resources at some point." Unbeknownst to them, broaden the search was exactly what Alexander wanted. His new network wasn't based on the old world markers of wealth and status. It was built on unconventional foundations, leveraging technology and global loopholes in unexpected ways. His hidden base wasn't a bunker. It was a decentralized web of operations and individuals bound by different principles. And Maya was not just a partner. She was crucial because her life Before him was a perfect camouflage, and her skills, with him, were indispensable. As the investigation floundered, Marcus and Isabella became more desperate, their public smiles growing tighter, their private arguments sharper. The city waited, watching Alexander and Maya. The quiet pair attended another smaller event, this time an art gallery opening, again drawing all eyes, again offering nothing but calm composure and a silent, united front. They weren't speaking secrets aloud, they were simply being the secret, letting the mystery fester, letting their enemies scramble in the dark. One evening, back in the minimalist apartment, Alexander showed Maya a complex projection on the wall, a web of connections starkly different from the corporate organizational charts he used to command. Lines snaked across continents, connecting unexpected nodes, small tech firms in obscure countries, research collectives, individuals with unique, often overlooked skill sets. Blackwood is making headway on this, Alexander noted, pointing to a section dealing with encrypted communication channels. He's good, better than I anticipated, but he's still looking through the wrong lens. He's looking for the Alexander Vance who built skyscrapers, not the one who learned how to build outside the foundation. Will it lead him to us? Maya asked, her finger tracing a line on the projected map leading to a small remote cluster of nodes. Eventually, perhaps to the edges, Alexander conceded, but by then it won't matter. The key is always one step ahead, one layer deeper. He turned from the projection, his gaze intense. Did you get the confirmation from Kyoto? Maya nodded, a flicker of triumph in her eyes. Yes, the final piece is in place. The funding is secured, the prototypes are ready for scale. Phase 2 is a go. Phase 2. The term hung in the air, loaded with unseen implications. Isabella and Marcus were focused on Phase 1, understanding the disappearance, the return, and the relationship. They were digging into Maya's past, Alexander's lost years, looking for conventional answers. They had hired the best investigator money could buy, activated their formidable network. But Alexander and Maya hadn't just been hiding, they had been innovating, building an empire based not on physical assets but on intellectual property, secure networks, and a form of distributed power that bypassed the old gatekeepers. And the quiet sister, the one no one saw, was not just a shield, but a key architect in this new invisible empire. The investigation into their past was irrelevant. Their real power was in their future. That night, Silas Blackwood filed another report. Frustrated but with a sliver of something new. He had found anecdotal evidence, faint whispers from locals in remote, unconnected locations, a fishing village in Chile, a small town in the Scottish Highlands, a forgotten corner of Southeast Asia, not of Alexander Vance, but of a quiet woman, unassuming but observant, asking questions, making contacts outside the usual tourist circuits, and sometimes a man with her, keeping shadows. They weren't living lavishly. They were embedding, learning, connecting with people who had reasons to fly under the radar. It wasn't much, just echoes, but it suggested Maya Sterling wasn't just a prop. She was actively involved, and the places they went, the people they met, none of it fit the profile of recovering corporate titans. Alexander Vance hadn't just vanished, he had gone off the grid, into a world Maya seemed uniquely equipped to inhabit. The question was, what kind of empire could two such unlikely figures build in the shadows? And how catastrophic would its emergence be for the world Alexander had left behind, and the people who thought they had destroyed him? Silas Blackwood's frustration was a living entity in his usually sterile office. His team, some of the most seasoned digital bloodhounds and human shadows money could hire, were hitting dead ends that made no logical sense. Alexander Vance's digital footprint from the last 3 years was less than that of a ghost. There were no sudden bursts of offshore activity, no large-scale movements of capital through traditional channels, nothing to suggest he had been funding a clandestine rebuilding operation using the billions everyone assumed he must have squirreled away. It was as if he, and whatever he was doing, existed in a financial dimension entirely separate from the one Blackwood specialized in. And then there was Maya Sterling. Her financial life remained stubbornly, infuriatingly dull. Blackwood's team had spent weeks meticulously sifting through her past, interviewing distant relatives who barely knew her, tracking down former university classmates who described her as nice but quiet, kept to herself. Her travel history, mundane on paper, was starting to yield a few more details as Blackwood leaned harder on less conventional sources, like off-book manifests from small regional airports or whispered observations from remote locales. The anecdotal reports, initially dismissed as noise, began to form a pattern. Yes, the quiet woman had been seen in a research outpost near a geothermal energy project in Iceland. She'd been spotted, equally unassuming, near a secured data storage facility in a converted Cold War bunker in Switzerland. There were mentions of her on a small private flight landing in a heavily monitored but remote area in New Zealand known for cutting-edge agricultural tech development. Always unassuming, always blending in, but undeniably there, in places linked not to high finance, but to technology, data, and innovative resources, often in areas that operated slightly outside the obvious Western financial and political spheres. And sometimes a man was with her, tall but described variably, sometimes with a beard, sometimes without, sometimes glasses, sometimes not. Reports were inconsistent enough to prevent easy identification, but if you squinted, if you overlaid the descriptions just right, the spectral image that coalesced felt unsettlingly like a deliberately disguised Alexander Vance. But these weren't reports of a man living in luxury or throwing money around. They were mentions of someone observing, asking technical questions, meeting with discreet individuals who clearly valued privacy over publicity. People connected to sustainable tech, secure networks, alternative energy sources, decentralized systems. It was a world Blackwood knew existed, but one rarely intersected with the high-stakes corporate warfare of Manhattan he usually navigated. He presented his findings to Marcus and Isabella, the frustration evident in his tone. There's no conventional paper trail for Vance, none. And Ms. Sterling's finances are impenetrable because there's nothing there to penetrate. She isn't spending Vance money, at least not in any way we can track. Her known income supports her known lifestyle perfectly. The reports I'm getting about her and a potential male companion put them in places like remote research facilities, offshore data havens, places involved in unconventional tech development. It's not the footprint of a man trying to reclaim a banking empire, Mr. Thorne. It's something different. Marcus slammed his fist on the table, the sound echoing in the tense room. Different? What does different mean, Blackwood? He's back. He showed his face. He's after something. What is it? Their fear was morphing into desperate anger. They had prepared for Alexander to reappear, perhaps with allies from his old world, ready to wage financial war. They had not prepared for him to seemingly abandon that world and build something entirely new, something they couldn't even properly define, let alone track. It means his resources aren't where you think they are, Blackwood explained patiently, though his own confusion was evident. They're not in traditional banks, not in publicly traded stocks, that we can see. He's built something off-grid, something decentralized, and Ms. Sterling appears to have been instrumental in connecting him to these resources, or these people. He looked at Isabella. Your sister, Ms. Thorne. Her unassuming nature isn't a cover for hidden wealth. It's a cover for hidden connection. She seems to have cultivated a network outside of your social strata, a network of people involved in areas completely unrelated to traditional finance or politics. Researchers, engineers, data specialists, people who prefer anonymity. She wasn't just hiding him, She was integrating him into a different world. Isabella stared at Blackwood in disbelief. Maya? Her quiet sister? Secretly connected to a global network of scientists and tech recluses? It sounded absurd. Maya barely attended family dinners, let alone hobnobbed with international innovators. But Blackwood wasn't prone to flights of fancy. The idea that Maya's quiet life wasn't just shyness, but a deeply ingrained habit of existing beneath the radar, suddenly felt terrifyingly real. Her lack of presence in their world wasn't a deficit, it was a strategic advantage in another. The frustration at hitting a wall, at being unable to understand Alexander's new power source, fueled Marcus's paranoia. Conventional tactics weren't working. Financial leverage was useless against an opponent operating outside the system. Public opinion, while initially shocked by Alexander's return, couldn't touch him if he wasn't engaging with the public sphere in any meaningful way beyond that initial gala appearance. They weren't issuing press releases, not making demands, not trying to reclaim Vance Industries through hostile takeover maneuvers. They were just there, operating in the shadows while their presence alone disrupted the comfortable status quo. "Okay," Marcus said finally, his voice dangerously calm. "New approach. If we can't find his resources, we'll find his vulnerabilities. Everyone has one. Blackwood, focus your resources on their activities. Now. Who are they meeting with? Where are they spending their time in the city? And Isabella, your sister. There has to be something in her past, some relationship, some dependency, something we can twist. Forget the money. Find her weakness. Every family has secrets. What is hers?" Isabella nodded, her eyes cold. The complex mix of emotions she felt about Maya, the resentment, the dismissiveness, the buried guilt, now coalesced into a hard determination to find and exploit her sister's breaking point. Maya had chosen him. She had betrayed their family by allying with the man who had publicly shamed them. Whatever quiet life Maya had built, whatever secrets she held, Isabella would expose them. While Marcus and Isabella scrambled in the dark, guided by Blackwood's increasingly puzzled reports, Alexander and Maya were indeed busy. They had anticipated every step, every predictable reaction. Blackwood's investigation was a tracing program they were allowing to run, revealing precisely how and where Marcus and Isabella were looking, confirming their continued inability to see beyond the conventional structures of power. In the minimalist apartment with the city lights a distant glow, Maya sat surrounded by screens displaying complex network maps. These weren't financial networks, they were data flows, energy grids, secure communication channels, decentralized autonomous organizations. The infrastructure of the future Alexander had spent the last 3 years helping to build, layer by careful layer, often in the remote, unassuming places Blackwood's reports had hinted at. Maya's expertise, honed through years of quiet, deep research and her natural affinity for understanding complex systems from the outside, had been crucial. She wasn't just a researcher, she was a systems architect, a network weaver in a world Alexander was just learning to navigate. "They're focusing on your past, Maya," Alexander noted, watching her work. "Every friend, every contact, every trip. Isabella is desperate. She thinks your secrets are conventional secrets. Financial, personal scandal, something she can understand and exploit." Maya smiled, a faint, almost sad curve of her lips. "My biggest secret in her eyes is probably that I never wanted to be part of her world in the first place. She'll never see the network as a secret, Alexander, because she doesn't see it as power, not the kind of power she understands." She pointed to a section of the map, a dense cluster of nodes representing a cutting-edge, decentralized energy trading platform. Phase 2 activation in 24 hours. This will send a ripple, something Marcus and Isabella won't be able to ignore or attribute to conventional forces. "A direct challenge," Alexander stated, his voice sharpening with anticipation. It wasn't a hostile takeover, not a public denouncement, but something more subtle, more disruptive. Their new energy platform, operating outside traditional exchanges and bypassing established utility companies by connecting directly with decentralized power producers and consumers, was designed to be a quiet revolution. Its success would undermine the very foundations of industries Isabella and Marcus had interests in, demonstrating the viability and power of an alternative system, the one Alexander and Maya had built. The next day, while Blackwood's team was still fruitlessly digging into Maya's childhood acquaintances and Alexander's defunct shell corporations, the first tremors hit. Not in the headlines, not in a stock market crash, but in the complex, subterranean world of energy grids and digital transactions. A small, almost undetectable anomaly appeared in the energy supply chain of several major industries, including some with significant ties to Thorne Enterprises and the Sterling family's remaining business interests. It was nothing catastrophic. Not yet. Just a flicker, a momentary, unexplained disruption. Industrial output in specific smaller sectors dipped marginally. A few automated supply contracts failed for a few seconds before righting themselves. It was enough to be noticed by technical analysts, enough to raise questions in quiet, specialized corners, but far too subtle for the front pages or the average consumer. Marcus Thorne received a cryptic report from one of his technical advisors. "Sir, there's some odd activity on the decentralized energy market feeds. Unusual volume and some untraceable nodes entering the system. It's causing minor fluctuations in our manufacturing subdivisions." "Decentralized energy?" Marcus scoffed. "That's niche. Doesn't matter. Focus on the market, on real power. Are you sure it's not just a glitch?" "We're running diagnostics, sir, but it's persistent," the advisor replied, clearly uneasy. It was like trying to swat a fly that wasn't really there, leaving faint, unsettling traces in its wake. This minor, untraceable disruption was Alexander and Maya's first strategic move. It wasn't about immediate financial gain. It was about demonstrating the existence and capability of their network. It was a whisper in the system, designed to be felt by those who understood the underlying infrastructure, a signal that a new player, operating by different rules, had entered the game. And it was undeniably linked to Alexander Vance, not through old money, but through new, unconventional power. Maya watched the real-time data reflect the subtle impact across affected systems. "They felt it," she said, turning to Alexander, "in their supply chain. Enough to notice, too subtle to fight directly." "Good," Alexander responded, a look of grim satisfaction on his face. "Let them wonder. Let them look for the source in the places they understand. While they're scrambling to find a conventional enemy, we'll be moving to the next phase." He looked at Maya, his gaze holding a depth of connection that was miles away from the calculating ambition he had shown at the altar. "Ready for the next step?" Maya nodded, a quiet power radiating from her. The shy sister, the one who had always been in the background, was now standing on the precipice of bringing down an empire alongside the man who had been publicly ruined. Their alliance, born in the shadows of his disappearance, forged in the unglamorous corners of the world, was about to challenge the very foundations of power Marcus and Isabella thought they controlled. The subtle disruption was just the beginning. The real challenge was about to commence, a challenge they could never have prepared for, because it was coming from a direction they had never bothered to look, from the quiet spaces, from the woman they had always underestimated. The subtle energy fluctuations, the strange, untraceable nodes in the decentralized networks continued. For Marcus Thorne, these minor technical anomalies were a growing source of irritation and, more unsettlingly, a creeping sense of unease. His technical advisors were perplexed. They could see the disruption, small but persistent, but they couldn't pinpoint its origin within any recognized system. It was like trying to grasp smoke. Meanwhile, Silas Blackwood's investigation into Alexander and Maya's past continued to yield only disconnected fragments. Whispers of Alexander in unexpected places, confirmation of Maya's unassuming travels to remote regions. The pattern of locations suggested technological interests, research, perhaps even resource acquisition, but offered no clear line back to a conventional financial power base or a specific, vulnerable weakness in either Alexander or Maya. The lack of a clear enemy, a recognizable threat, was deeply frustrating for Marcus. He was a man accustomed to fighting battles he understood: hostile takeovers, market manipulation, political maneuvering. This felt different, like being pricked by 1,000 invisible needles. Isabella, increasingly agitated, pressed Blackwood relentlessly for tangible results. "There has to be something, Silas. Something we can use. A mistress, a hidden family, an old crime, and something that will discredit Alexander. And Maya, she can't be as perfect as she seems. Everyone has a price, everyone has a vulnerability." Blackwood, sensing their desperation, began to focus more intensely on Maya's personal life, hoping to find some leverage point outside of Alexander's machinations. Her few close friends were discreetly investigated. Their lives, too, were remarkably unremarkable on the surface. A librarian, a graphic designer, a primary school teacher, none with obvious connections to powerful networks or hidden wealth. It was baffling. It was as if Maya had deliberately cultivated a life utterly devoid of the conventional vulnerabilities of high society. But then Blackwood's team, digging deeper into digitized archives of local newspapers from decades past, stumbled upon a series of articles that seemed unconnected at first. Reports of a tragic accident 25 years ago, a house fire in a middle-class neighborhood resulting in fatalities. The names mentioned were local, unknown to the Sterling family's social circle. However, buried deep in the follow-up articles, a detail emerged that made Blackwood pause. Among the survivors mentioned, pulled from the burning building by first responders, was a child, a young girl, and her last name, Sterling. Further digging, cross-referencing birth records and old census data, confirmed the shocking connection. The fire had claimed the lives of a young couple. Their daughter, a toddler, had been rescued. Maya Sterling's paternal aunt and uncle, and Maya's own father, Senator Sterling, had been involved in the aftermath, discreetly arranging for the surviving child to be taken in by relatives on the other side of the family, distant cousins also named Sterling, but not in the prominent branch that included the senator and Isabella. The child, according to the records, had later been formally adopted by these distant relatives, changing her full name. Her birth name, Lily Sterling. Her adoptive name, Maya Sterling. The revelation landed with the force of a physical blow for Isabella when Blackwood presented his findings. "Maya was adopted?" she repeated, her voice barely a whisper, a complex mixture of shock, disbelief, and a strange flicker of something that might have been morbid fascination. She had never known this. It explained so much, and yet nothing. Maya's quietness, her subtle detachment from the family, was it rooted in knowing she wasn't truly one of them, by blood, in the way Isabella was? "Yes, Miss Thorne," Blackwood confirmed, the satisfaction of finally unearthing a significant secret warring with his professional detachment. "Formal adoption. Apparently your father handled it with extreme discretion. The fire, the loss of his brother and sister-in-law, the care of the orphaned niece. It was all kept very quiet to avoid scandal, perhaps, or simply out of a desire for privacy during a difficult time. Your side of the family effectively took her in, but legally she was adopted by different relatives. It seems after her adoptive parents passed away, she maintained loose ties only with your immediate family." The potential leverage was immediately clear to Marcus, even as Isabella grappled with the personal implications. "Her true identity," Marcus said, his eyes gleaming with a cruel, opportunistic light. "A fabricated past, a secret she's kept hidden. This is it, Isabella. This is her vulnerability. If we expose this, the quiet, trustworthy Maya Sterling, Alexander Vance's supposedly loyal partner, built her life on a lie." Isabella, still processing the news about her sister, felt a twisted sense of validation. Maya had always felt like an outsider. Now there was a reason, but exposing it, that was complicated. It was a family secret, one their father had gone to great lengths to bury. It involved tragedy, loss. Her initial reaction was cold calculation, seeing the potential to shatter Maya's carefully constructed image. But even through her resentment, a flicker of doubt emerged. This felt different from a business scandal or a personal betrayal. It felt like prying into something fragile and deeply personal. "Are you sure, Silas?" Isabella asked, her voice tight. "Completely certain?" "The records are clear, Ms. Thorne," Blackwood confirmed. "Birth certificate, adoption papers, school enrollment forms under both names. It's buried deep, but it's there. Her name was Lily Sterling. She became Maya Sterling." Marcus, however, had no such qualms. He saw only opportunity. Alexander Vance had chosen a partner whose greatest asset was her apparent unassuming transparency and quiet integrity. Exposing Maya as someone who had hidden her true identity, who was not biologically a Sterling in the way everyone assumed, would cast doubt on everything about her, and by extension, on her alliance with Alexander. It would make their unconventional network seem less like innovation and more like a conspiracy built on deceit. "We release it," Marcus stated, his decision final. "Anonymously at first. Let the rumors start. Let the press dig. Alexander Vance's mysterious partner's secret identity revealed. It will throw everything into question. It will make Maya radioactive, and anyone associated with her, including Alexander, will be tainted." Isabella hesitated. "Father will be furious. He wanted this kept quiet." "Senator Sterling is running for re-election," Marcus countered coldly. "He can manage a minor, distant family scandal better than being linked to a man who disappeared and returned operating in the shadows. This protects him, Isabella. It frames Maya as the deceiver, not us. It turns their greatest strength, her invisibility, her perceived integrity, into their greatest weakness." Reluctantly, Isabella agreed. The decision was made. Blackwood was instructed to plant the information discreetly, allowing it to surface gradually through anonymous tips to tabloids known for their voracious appetite for society scandal. The goal wasn't a direct headline immediately, but a slow leak, allowing the dirt to spread, forcing Maya to react, to defend herself, to be pulled into the very public scrutiny she had spent her life avoiding. The first articles were vague, buried deep in celebrity gossip columns. Mentions of unconfirmed rumors about the true identity of a prominent society figure's sister. Hints of a dark family secret involving adoption and hidden pasts. The language was suggestive, designed to provoke speculation without making outright libelous claims. But for those in the know, especially those who had been digging into Maya Sterling's life, the message was chillingly clear. The hunt was on. Maya saw the first ripples almost immediately. Not in the mainstream news, but in the subtle shifts within the online communities she interacted with, the quiet networks she was part of. Encrypted messages from contacts who valued discretion suddenly included veiled warnings about increased external scrutiny and a potential compromise of passive defenses. Her seemingly innocent online activities suddenly received unexpected pings, probes designed to test her security. "They found something," Maya stated calmly, looking up from her screen in the minimalist apartment. Alexander was across the room, immersed in his own work. Alexander turned, his expression instantly alert. "Silas Blackwood?" "Most likely," Maya confirmed. "They're tapping into the whispers, and they found the adoption." Alexander was silent for a moment, his mind rapidly processing the implications. The accident, the family tragedy, the discreet handling by Senator Sterling. It was a vulnerability, not in a financial or strategic sense, but a deeply personal one. A secret Maya had lived with, perhaps one she had kept private even from her closest friends. Exposing it was a cruel, calculated move designed to destabilize her, to shatter the quiet credibility that was her defense. How do you know? Alexander asked, his voice low. Not from the news yet, Maya replied. From the way the network is reacting. The probes, the signals. They're trying to verify it, trying to assess the impact of exposing it. It's about to go public, Alexander. My history. My name. There was no panic in her voice, just a quiet acknowledgement. She had lived with this truth for decades. Its potential exposure had always been a possibility, a vulnerability she carried. Isabella, Alexander stated, his voice hard. This is her, Marcus's strategy, using her knowledge of your family to find a personal angle. She wants to break you, Maya, to make you regret standing with me. Maya's gaze was steady, meeting his. I know, but it won't break me. I know who I am, Alexander. Lily Sterling died in that fire with her parents. Maya Sterling is the woman I became, the life I built. It's not a lie. It's my story. Her strength, her quiet resilience in the face of this deeply personal threat resonated deeply with Alexander. He had seen her navigate challenges in isolation, seen her build connections and resources completely outside the world he knew. He had offered her a refuge, a partnership built on mutual respect and shared purpose, but Maya's resilience was entirely her own. This revelation, devastating as it was emotionally, wouldn't crumble her. It would only reveal to their enemies how little they truly understood her. They think revealing this will cripple us, Alexander said, a dangerous glint in his eyes. They think it will make our network seem built on deception. Let them think that, Maya responded, a faint, almost serene smile on her lips. While they're focusing on a perceived personal scandal, they'll be distracted from the real work, the real building. Alexander crossed the room and stood before her, reaching out to cup her face gently in his hands. His thumbs brushed lightly over her cheekbones. This is a cruel move, Maya. This isn't about business anymore. It's personal. It always was for them, she said, her gaze unwavering. Isabella couldn't stand that I had something she didn't, that I wasn't defined by the Sterling name in the way she is. Now she has a reason to believe she's superior. She's wrong, Alexander said softly, his voice filled with a conviction that went beyond mere comfort. You navigated a world she knows nothing about. You built a life on resilience and quiet determination. That's a different kind of strength, Maya. A stronger kind. He paused, his eyes searching hers. Are you truly ready for this? For the storm that's coming when this news breaks? It won't be quiet. It's my history, Alexander, Maya affirmed, placing her hands over his. It deserves to be told, even if it's for cruel reasons. Let them expose it. Let the world know. It changes nothing about who I am today, and their desperation to use it. That tells us more about their vulnerabilities than it does about mine. Alexander nodded, the tenderness in his expression hardening into a shared resolve. The personal attack on Maya, intended to cripple them emotionally and strategically, was now being reframed. It was a sign of their enemy's fear, their inability to find a conventional weakness. It exposed Marcus and Isabella's ruthlessness, their willingness to weaponize personal tragedy. And most importantly, it provided a perfect, albeit painful, distraction. While the world was focused on the sensational story of Maya Sterling's secret identity and the family drama, Alexander and Maya could accelerate their plans, operating in the blind spot created by the unfolding scandal. The quiet disruption in the energy markets had been a whisper. Exposing Maya's past would be a shout, a sensational headline designed to consume attention. And beneath the cover of that noise, Alexander and Maya would be free to work, preparing for the moves that would truly dismantle Isabella and Marcus Thorne's carefully constructed empire. The truth about Lily Sterling was about to come to light, not for justice or understanding, but as a weapon wielded by those who feared the quiet power of Maya Sterling and the man who had returned from the shadows with her. The anonymous tips, meticulously planted by Silas Blackwood's team under Marcus Thorne's directive, began to sprout in the fertile ground of the city's gossip mill. Initially, they were confined to the murky depths of online forums and the back pages of sensational tabloids, breathless mentions of a secret identity linked to the recent society scandal, hints of falsified records surrounding the enigmatic partner of a suddenly returned billionaire. The language was designed to pique curiosity without triggering libel lawsuits, spinning a narrative of hidden deceit rather than tragic circumstance. But the media, sensing blood in the water after the dramatic gala appearance of Alexander Vance and Maya Sterling, quickly picked up the scent. Reporters, sniffing around Isabella Sterling's past and her sister's sudden prominence, started digging. They pulled old records, pressured sources, connected the dots Blackwood had so carefully laid out. Within days, the whispers exploded into screaming headlines. Alexander Vance's mystery woman, not a Sterling by blood, shocking adoption secret revealed, blared one tabloid banner alongside a photograph of a serene-faced Maya from the gala, contrasted with a grainy image of the house fire from decades ago. Mainstream news outlets, initially hesitant, followed suit with slightly more restrained but equally devastating reports, confirming Maya Sterling's birth name as Lily Sterling, detailing the tragic fire that orphaned her, and revealing that while close to Senator Sterling's family, she had been formally adopted by a different, less prominent branch of the family before later living primarily with her aunt and uncle and then on her own. The narrative, fueled by sources undoubtedly linked to the Thorne camp, emphasized the hidden past, the deception by omission, questioning Maya's integrity and, by extension, casting a shadow of suspicion on Alexander Vance and their alliance. Isabella and Marcus, operating through proxies, ensured the story wasn't framed as a family tragedy, but as Maya deliberately concealing her origins, gaining entry into the Sterling social world under false pretenses implicitly. Social media, a ravenous beast, devoured the story, dissecting Maya's life, speculating on her motives, flooding platforms with cruel comments and unfounded accusations. She went from being the quiet, intriguing figure at the gala to a target of public scrutiny and judgment, painted as a deceiver who had infiltrated a prominent family. In the minimalist apartment, seemingly untouched by the media firestorm raging outside its walls, Maya and Alexander watched the news unfold. Maya sat at her screen, calmly scrolling through the deluge of articles, posts, and comments. There was a profound sadness in her eyes, seeing a deeply personal tragedy twisted into a tool for public defamation. But there was no shock, no despair. This was what she had anticipated, what she had prepared herself for since the moments Blackwood's probe hit her network. "They're painting you as a fraud, Maya," Alexander said, standing behind her, his hands resting lightly on her shoulders. His touch was grounding, reassuring. Outside, his carefully curated public image from the gala was also being questioned, his return now framed by some as potentially linked to a manipulative scheme involving a woman with a hidden past. "They're using my history as a weapon," Maya corrected, her voice quiet but steady. It was hard, seeing the details of her deepest vulnerability, the loss of her parents, the complex reality of her family connections, splayed across headlines, distorted and judged by millions who knew nothing about her life, nothing about the quiet child who survived a fire. It hurt in a way no business setback or financial loss ever could for Alexander. This was her identity, her roots, being attacked. But the pain didn't paralyze her. It fueled a cold, clear resolve. She had survived worse. She could survive this. "This is low, even for Isabella," Alexander stated, his voice tight with protective anger. He knew Isabella was ruthless, but weaponizing adoption, a family tragedy, against her own sister, it confirmed the depth of her cruelty and desperation. "It's Marcus's strategy," Maya said. "Find a personal weakness, a vulnerability outside the financial world. My past is his leverage. Isabella is just facilitating it." While acknowledging Isabella's role, part of Maya understood her sister's action as a twisted outcome of their complex history and Isabella's own insecurities, now amplified by fear and Marcus's influence. It didn't excuse it, but added a layer of tragic understanding to the betrayal. News of the leak reached Senator Sterling like a political earthquake. He was in the middle of crucial campaign fundraising when his chief of staff burst in, face ashen, tablet in hand. Reading the headlines, seeing the details of his long-buried secret splashed across national news, the senator exploded. His fury wasn't just about the personal embarrassment or the reopening of old wounds. It was about the political fallout during an election year. The narrative being spun that he, Senator Sterling, had been part of a scheme to hide a relative's identity, allowing her entry into influential circles under false pretenses, was politically toxic. It reeked of old money privilege covering up uncomfortable truths, exactly the kind of narrative his opponents loved to exploit. His first call wasn't to his lawyers or his PR team. It was a furious, expletive-laden tirade directed straight at Isabella. "What in God's name have you done, Isabella?" he roared into the phone, his voice shaking with rage. "My brother's tragedy, Lily's past. After all these years, all the effort to keep it quiet, you've exposed it. For what? Your petty rivalry with Vance? Your husband's paranoid games? Do you have any idea the damage this is doing? My campaign. Everything." Isabella, caught off guard by the intensity of her father's fury, stammered out justifications, explanations of how Alexander and Maya were a threat, how exposing Maya's past was a necessary strategy. But the senator wasn't listening. "Necessary?" he scoffed, his voice dripping with contempt. "You think this benefits us? This makes us look like deceivers, Isabella, like we're hiding something. You were supposed to be smart. You were supposed to protect this family's name. You've done the opposite. You've handed our enemies a weapon disguised as a scandal." He hung up before she could respond, the sound echoing like a death knell in her ear. The senator then summoned Marcus, his tone colder, more controlled, but no less lethal. He didn't shout. He simply laid out the political and personal consequences of their actions, making it clear that Marcus's strategy had backfired spectacularly on the Sterling side of the alliance. The family's reputation was being dragged through the mud, not by Alexander Vance, but by the very people who were supposed to be protecting it. It created a bitter rift between Marcus and Senator Sterling, adding another layer of dangerous tension to the already complex situation. Marcus, while publicly defending the move as a necessary countermeasure against Alexander's potential deceit, privately acknowledged to Isabella that the fallout was more complicated than anticipated. The wave of sympathy for the orphaned child hidden beneath the deceiver narrative meant the public reaction wasn't neatly controllable. They had landed a blow, but it was a messy one, with unintended consequences for their own standing, especially Senator Sterling's. Meanwhile, cocooned in their quiet apartment, Maya and Alexander observed the chaos they had intentionally allowed to unfold. This public storm, while personally painful for Maya, was strategically invaluable. It was a massive, noisy smokescreen. While the media, the public, and even Marcus and Isabella's investigative resources were fixated on the adoption scandal, dissecting Maya's past, debating the ethics of the leak, watching for Maya's public reaction, Alexander and Maya were free to operate in the blind spot created by the distraction. "They're completely focused on managing the scandal and digging into my background," Maya confirmed, monitoring the digital pulse of both the media frenzy and Blackwood's reduced probes into their current activities. "Their core systems are complacent, predictable, exactly what we need," Alexander said, moving from behind her desk to the main control panels of their apartment-cum-command center. Screens flickered to life, displaying complex data structures far removed from social media feeds and news headlines. This was the infrastructure of the building he had been working on: decentralized networks, secure digital assets, cutting-edge technological applications. Maya walked over to join him, her personal pain folded away for the moment, her focus sharpening on the task ahead. This was the counter-move, the maneuver designed to leverage the distraction and strike at the heart of Marcus Thorne's power structure in a way he wouldn't see coming. The subtle energy grid disruption was just a test, Alexander explained, his voice calm, analytical. Phase 2 validated our network's ability to interact with established infrastructure anonymously. Now it's time for Phase 3. He pointed to a schematic on the main screen, a complex diagram of digital pathways and resource flows. Marcus Thorne's real chokehold isn't just in traditional finance anymore. It's in his control over critical digital infrastructure, data storage, secure communication lines, energy distribution automation. He's built layers of dependency into sectors he thought were untouchable because they weren't public utilities. Our network can bypass those layers, Maya stated, her finger tracing alternative pathways on the screen. Route around his control points, create parallel structures that make his chokeholds irrelevant. Precisely, Alexander confirmed. While he's distracted by the noise of the adoption scandal, trying to control the narrative about your past and manage Senator Sterling's fallout, we initiate distributed, non-attributable actions across multiple points in his digital infrastructure, not to crash it, not to destroy it, but to demonstrate its vulnerability, to show his allies and investors that his control isn't absolute, that there's an alternative. A better, more secure, more decentralized way. The plan was intricate, leveraging the very technologies and networks they had spent the last 3 years building in obscurity, often with Maya as the key connector to the quiet innovators and decentralized communities around the globe. It wasn't an attack recognizable on a traditional battlefield. It was a digital dismantling, a strategic erosion of power from within the system, using the system itself. And Maya's deep understanding of these unconventional networks, her ability to identify the key nodes and leverage points, was invaluable. The energy sector first, Maya suggested, her gaze fixed on the schematic. It was Phase 2. It's where we showed our hand subtly. Now we show it a little firmer, enough to make them panic but not enough to trigger a hard system lockdown they can fight conventionally. Alexander nodded in agreement. Simultaneous localized disruptions across key industrial subdivisions linked to Thorne Enterprises. Nothing critical, nothing that harms the public. Just enough to cause production delays, contract failures, financial hemorrhaging that can't be explained away by a simple glitch. They began initiating the sequence, a series of commands sent through encrypted channels, activating protocols built into their decentralized network. The work was quiet, meticulous, requiring Maya's precise calibration to ensure the actions were untraceable back to their specific location or obvious source. While the world debated Maya Sterling's origins and dissecting her family tree, Alexander Vance, the ruined billionaire, and Maya Sterling, the deceitful adoptee, were launching a silent, targeted strike at the foundations of Marcus Thorne's empire. The pain of the public exposure of her past was real for Maya, a deep, aching wound. But she channeled it, transforming the unjust scrutiny into fuel for the fight. Her quiet determination now focused on dismantling the power of the people who had used her life as a weapon. The first reports of the new disruptions started filtering into Marcus Thorne's office within hours. Not from the media this time, but from frantic division heads within Thorne Enterprises. Unexplained minor malfunctions across multiple industrial sites. Equipment failures attributed to power inconsistencies. Supply chain disruptions caused by automated systems suddenly losing sync. It wasn't a cyber attack, not in the traditional sense. There were no firewalls breached, no data stolen. It was something else. Something far more insidious, because it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, subtly undermining the efficiency and reliability Marcus prided himself on. Silas Blackwood, still busy managing the fallout from the adoption leak and now tasked with investigating these new technical anomalies, was increasingly bewildered. "The disruptions are real, sir," he reported to Marcus, his voice strained. "But our cybersecurity and infrastructure experts can't find a source. There's no signature, no malicious code we can track. It's like the system is twitching on its own, but the anomalies correlate precisely with operations linked to Thorn Enterprises, or companies you have significant interests in. Marcus's face was a mask of controlled fury mixed with growing fear. The adoption scandal had been messy but understandable. This was not. This was Alexander Vance striking back, but not with a financial attack, not with legal action. He was using something else, something Marcus couldn't see, couldn't grasp. And it was connected to Maya. It had to be. Her quiet world of remote tech and decentralized networks. "Maintain the pressure on her past," Marcus ordered Blackwood, his voice low and menacing. "Keep the media focused on the scandal. Make her public figure radioactive, and find the source of these disruptions, Blackwood. Any source. This isn't just business anymore. It's a direct challenge, and if Alexander Vance thinks he can hide behind a tragic backstory and a network of tech ghosts, he's wrong. We will find their weakness, and we will crush them." He had exposed Maya's secret, thinking it would be her undoing. He didn't realize that in forcing Maya to confront her past on a global stage, he had solidified her resolve and given Alexander the perfect cover to unleash the next phase of their unconventional war. The battle for narrative control was raging in the media, but the real war, the dismantling of Marcus Thorne's empire layer by digital layer, was happening silently, invisibly, in the background, masterminded by the woman everyone had always underestimated, and the man everyone had thought was gone forever. And the subtle disruptions were just the beginning. The next few moves, powered by an invisible network and fueled by a quiet strength scorned by the world, would directly target the source of Marcus Thorne's power and expose the fragile foundations of the empire he had built on Alexander Vance's humiliation. The subtle disruptions that had begun as technical anomalies quickly escalated into undeniable operational chaos for Thorn Enterprises and its closely linked partners. It was no longer just minor flickers in energy supply chains. It was critical systems failing, not crashing entirely, but malfunctioning in ways that caused significant delays, misallocated resources, and substantial financial losses. Automated manufacturing plants experienced unpredictable halts as energy flows momentarily rerouted, bypassing Thorn-controlled nodes. Secure communication networks integral to supply chain logistics suffered from inexplicable latency and phantom traffic, corrupting data packets and causing missed deadlines. Financial transactions linked to Thorn assets, while not stolen, were sometimes delayed or rerouted through obscure, heavily encrypted channels before reappearing, leaving a trail of frustrating, untraceable breadcrumbs that spooked investors. It was death by 1,000 cuts, precise and debilitating, and utterly untraceable to a conventional attacker. Marcus Thorne raged, his voice raw from lack of sleep and constant yelling. His technical teams were working around the clock, poring over firewalls, scanning for malware, trying to find a digital signature, a point of entry, anything that resembled a traditional cyber attack. But they found nothing. The disruptions weren't originating from outside the network. They seemed to be manipulating the existing flows, leveraging inherent flexibilities and decentralized elements in ways that were sophisticated, unconventional, and deeply unsettling. It was like water suddenly deciding to flow uphill in precisely calibrated small amounts, just enough to empty a tank over time without anyone touching the pump. "Find it!" Marcus roared into the phone at a trembling subordinate. "I don't care how you do it. Is it a virus? Is it an inside job? Is someone physically manipulating the infrastructure?" All his questions led to dead ends. No virus. No disgruntled employee with access to critical systems. No physical tampering identified. The problems were digital, systemic, and seemingly self-generating, impacting Thorn projects and assets with pinpoint accuracy. His allies, seeing their own operations affected by the ripple effects, were starting to call, their tones shifting from concern to irritated pressure. How could Marcus Thorne, the man who prided himself on impregnable control, be letting this happen? The confidence Isabella and Marcus had projected since Alexander's return, shattered by the adoption scandal, was now evaporating entirely under the relentless, invisible pressure of these digital attacks. Silas Blackwood was equally frustrated, but his sharp mind was beginning to connect dots that Marcus's fury prevented him from seeing. Blackwood had spent decades tracking money, uncovering secrets, identifying conventional power structures. This felt different. This wasn't about theft or destruction. It was about disruption and control, executed with a finesse that bypassed traditional safeguards. He went back to his notes on Maya Sterling's travels, the remote research facilities, the offshore data havens, the places involved in decentralized tech. He cross-referenced them with the locations and types of disruptions targeting Thorne's assets. A pattern was emerging, faint but undeniable. The disruptions weren't random. They correlated with the very technologies and infrastructures Maya had been quietly exploring during her time away from the public eye. Decentralized energy grids, secure peer-to-peer data storage networks, autonomous operating systems. The pieces weren't fitting into the puzzle of a conventional attack. They were forming a different picture entirely. "It's not a frontal assault, Mr. Thorne," Blackwood explained, his voice tight with the effort of describing something his client wasn't ready to grasp. "It's a parallel system, or a set of systems, operating alongside yours, subtly interacting with it, redirecting flows, introducing variables we can't predict because we don't control the source or the protocols. It's leveraging the decentralized nature of modern tech infrastructure against you. It feels like demonstration more than destruction, like they're proving they can do this, proving their system is viable." "Their system?" Marcus demanded, pacing the room like a caged animal. "What system? Alexander Vance has no system. He has no capital. He's been hiding for 3 years." "He wasn't hiding, sir," Blackwood countered, his gaze steady. "He was building and collecting, not money in banks but connections, knowledge, capabilities. And Maya Sterling was the key. Her network, her understanding of this alternative tech landscape. She was putting the pieces together while everyone was looking for a vanished CEO." He paused, taking a breath. "The adoption scandal, sir. It's a perfect cover. While the media circus and your resources are focused on her past, on the personal drama, they are executing this. It's a strategic distraction." Isabella, who had been listening in tense silence, felt a cold dread wash over her. Her father's furious calls hadn't stopped, blaming her and Marcus for the political fallout of the adoption leak, which was being relentlessly covered, overshadowing his campaign. And now this. These untraceable attacks, striking at the heart of Marcus's business. Her initial satisfaction at exposing Maya's past was long gone, replaced by the terrifying realization that they had underestimated Alexander Vance, and perhaps more dangerously, underestimated her own sister. Maya hadn't just shrugged off the scandal. She was using it, transforming deep personal pain into strategic advantage. The shy, quiet sister was a warrior operating on a battlefield Isabella couldn't even perceive. "How do we stop it, Blackwood?" Isabella asked, her voice thin. "We need to understand their network," Blackwood admitted, frustrated. "Find its core, its creators, its resources. It's not on the conventional map. The data trails are encrypted, fragmented, routed through peer-to-peer nodes that dissolve the moment you follow them. It was designed to be invisible to people like us, sir. People who operate within the established financial and digital frameworks. So he built an empire out of decentralized, untraceable junk and deployed it using my ex-fiance's quiet sister as his architect?" Marcus's voice was laced with bitter disbelief. The sheer audacity, the sheer otherness of Alexander's approach was infuriating. He wasn't challenging Marcus on familiar ground. He was fighting an entirely different war with entirely different weapons. The disruptions weren't stopping. Financial projections for Thorne Enterprises were starting to look grim. Analysts were quietly downgrading estimates, citing unpredictable operational costs and unreliable infrastructure dependencies. Rumors began to surface in financial circles not about a cyber attack, but about systemic vulnerabilities within Thorne's digital ecosystem, making potential partners wary, creating a climate of uncertainty that was just as damaging as direct financial loss. Marcus's aura of impregnable control was dissolving, replaced by an image of a man wrestling with unseen forces he couldn't understand, let alone combat. While the world watched the public spectacle of the adoption scandal and the financial world whispered nervously about Thorne's troubles, Alexander and Maya were working, not in a fortified war room, but from their quiet, temporary apartment, the hum of advanced technology surrounding them. The maps on the screens weren't just showing disruptions, they were showing the flow of a parallel economy, a new infrastructure based on principles antithetical to Marcus Thorne's centralized, control-based empire. Energy trading nodes are consistently rerouting through our decentralized grid, Maya reported calmly, her eyes scanning the data streams. Automated logistics systems are beginning to recognize our P2P data channels as more reliable than Thorne's compromised secure lines. We're not forcing the change, Alexander. We're simply presenting a more efficient, more resilient alternative. The system is choosing us. Alexander watched, a quiet intensity in his gaze. This was the building he had spoken of at the gala. Not rebuilding Vance Industries the way it was, but building a new kind of power, a new economy from the ground up, leveraging emerging technologies and global communities that operated outside the traditional power structures Marcus and Isabella inhabited. His time away hadn't been a period of defeat. It had been an incubation, a forced perspective that allowed him to see the vulnerabilities in the old system and the potential in the new. Maya, with her background outside the elite and her natural curiosity about alternative systems, had been the perfect partner in identifying and connecting with this nascent, decentralized world. Every disruption we introduce, Alexander stated, his voice low, highlights a point of failure in his centralized control. Every time his system stutters, our system becomes infinitesimally more appealing, more reliable. It's not about taking him down with one blow, it's about making his infrastructure obsolete, piece by piece, demonstrating that his empire is built on sand. The personal attacks on Maya, the relentless dissection of her adoption and family history, continued in the media. She deliberately chose not to respond publicly, denying Isabella and Marcus the confrontation they craved. Instead, she channeled the raw, painful energy of seeing her life twisted into a weapon into the focused, precise execution of their digital strategy. Every successful bypass of a Thorne-controlled node, every seamless rerouting of critical data through their network felt like a small, silent act of defiance against the people who had tried to break her spirit by exposing her deepest vulnerabilities. Her quietness wasn't just a personality trait anymore, it was a strategic veil, hiding a formidable technical mind and a steel-trap will. Silas Blackwood, following every lead, every anomaly, was starting to bypass the corporate firewalls Marcus's teams were focused on. He was looking at the typus of traffic, the nature of the disruptions. He was tracing the echoes of code, the digital footprints left not by traditional hackers but by systems designed for anonymity and decentralization. He began experimenting, setting up segregated test environments, simulating the conditions reported by Thorne's affected divisions. He started seeing how these decentralized protocols, these alternative data pathways, could interact with and subtly undermine centralized control points. His research led him to academic papers on peer-to-peer networks, to forums discussing blockchain applications beyond cryptocurrency, to communities building open-source energy management systems. And Maya Sterling's name, under various online aliases linked to her research past, appeared in the historical records of these communities, not as a leader, but as a quiet, insightful contributor, asking fundamental questions, connecting abstract theories to practical applications. Blackwood had found the fingerprints not of a hacker but of an architect working in the shadows of a new digital world, a world Maya Sterling inhabited. He started building a map not of Thorne's vulnerabilities, but of Alexander and Maya's network, tracing connections not through bank accounts, but through encrypted server logs in unlikely locations across the globe, through participation in invite-only digital consortiums, through contributions to obscure, cutting-edge open-source projects. This network was vast, complex, and astonishingly resilient, woven together by secure communication layers and seemingly funded by untraceable digital assets generated within the network itself, bypassing the need for traditional currency entirely in some areas. "Mr. Thorne," Blackwood reported, his voice filled with a mixture of intellectual awe and professional dread, "I think I understand what he built. It's not a company you can buy or break. It's an ecosystem. A parallel infrastructure based on decentralized technologies. They're peeling away the layers of your control by offering a viable alternative system. Every disruption incentivizes adoption of their protocols. Every failure of your centralized systems drives people to their decentralized solutions." And Maya Sterling, she didn't just connect Alexander Vance to this world, she helped him build bridges into it. She is deeply embedded. Marcus listened, the color draining from his face. An ecosystem? A parallel infrastructure? It sounded less like a business rival and more like a fundamental shift in reality. He had been so focused on the old rules of the game, on money and political leverage and public image, that he hadn't seen the board being changed entirely. "And Alexander Vance?" Marcus finally managed, his voice hoarse. "What is his role in this ecosystem?" "He's the catalyst, the strategist," Blackwood replied. "He brings the vision, the understanding of how to target weak points in the old world. But he relies heavily on Ms. Sterling and the network she cultivated. She's not just his partner, sir. In this world, she might be his key resource, his bottleneck. If we can sever his ties to that network, if we can discredit her within that community, that might be our way in." The adoption scandal was still raging, but it was having an unexpected effect within the very communities Blackwood was studying. While the mainstream media painted Maya as deceitful, the decentralized tech world, valuing transparency and often skeptical of traditional power structures, reacted differently. Some were silent, wary, but others, particularly those who knew Maya's quiet reputation for integrity and technical insight, saw the media frenzy less as a personal failing and more as an attack by the old guard, proof that she was challenging the system. The attempt to weaponize her past was backfiring within the very community Marcus needed to undermine. "Focus everything on Maya's connections within that world, Blackwood," Marcus ordered, a new, chilling calm in his voice. "Forget the public scandal for a moment. Find the people who trust her, who rely on her in this decentralized chaos. Find their vulnerabilities, and then we apply pressure. We show them that their alternative world isn't immune to the forces of the old one. We make that ecosystem toxic for Maya Sterling. We make them push her out, and when she's isolated, when her network turns on her, Alexander Vance loses his architect. He loses his connection to the source of his new power. He becomes a ghost again, and this time the ghost won't have anywhere to hide, because we will burn the bridges she built." The battle had shifted again, from direct attacks and public scandals to a targeted war for influence and loyalty within the invisible networks Maya Sterling had quietly helped to build. And Marcus Thorne was prepared to play dirty, targeting the very foundations of trust that held Alexander and Maya's new world together. With the adoption scandal dominating headlines, creating a smokescreen of personal drama and public judgment, Marcus Thorne and Isabella Sterling shifted their strategy, guided by Silas Blackwood's increasingly nuanced understanding of Alexander Vance and Maya Sterling's new world. The public narrative was a devastating weapon against Maya's reputation in the traditional sense, but it wasn't crippling their operations. Blackwood's research confirmed that Alexander and Maya's true power lay within the decentralized digital ecosystem, a network bound by principles of autonomy and mutual trust, often hostile to the centralized control that defined Marcus's empire. This network wasn't susceptible to conventional financial pressure or public shaming in the way high society or corporate structures were. Their new target wasn't public opinion, it was the intricate web of relationships and shared ideals that formed the foundation of Maya's influence within this hidden world. "Forget the front pages for a moment," Marcus instructed Blackwood, his voice low and focused. "The public can debate her family history all they want. It's a distraction, just as you said. Now, the real work is to find the key individuals within this ecosystem who rely on Maya, or who are gatekeepers for crucial parts of it, the ones whose trust and loyalty she's earned. And then we lean on them." Blackwood, now armed with a deeper understanding of the decentralized landscape, began identifying key nodes, influential developers in open-source projects Maya had contributed to, operators of critical secure data infrastructure, founders of decentralized energy cooperatives that were now showing subtle signs of Alexander and Maya's influence. These weren't corporate executives who feared stock price drops or boardrooms. They were often individuals motivated by ideology, by a belief in building a more open, resilient digital future. Attacking them required different tactics. Pressure came subtly at first. Targeted distributed denial-of-service attacks on smaller, non-critical platforms used by network members. Discreet inquiries to employers or academic institutions, raising vague questions about affiliations or potential conflicts of interest. Leveraging existing regulatory frameworks in creative ways to introduce bureaucratic hurdles or legal ambiguities for projects linked to the network. It wasn't overt aggression. It was harassment, designed to create friction, introduce risk, and make the association with Alexander Vance, the former corporate titan now linked to scandal, seem like a liability to those who valued their independence and the network's integrity. Word of the pressure campaigns reached Alexander and Maya instantly through their secure channels. Unlike the public scandal which hit Maya personally, this was a direct threat to the people she cared about and the community she had helped nurture. Encrypted messages, detailed probes into personal lives, sudden audits of small tech startups, warnings from cautious collaborators. "They're targeting the network directly now," Maya reported, her face grave as she analyzed the incoming reports. "Not hitting the infrastructure yet, but putting pressure on the people. They're trying to make my association, our association, toxic within the community." Alexander stood beside her, his expression grim. This was where Maya was most vulnerable, not because of a hidden past, but because of her genuine connections, her earned trust within this alternative world. His old world operated on leverage and transactions. Maya's new world operated on collaboration and reputation. Marcus, understanding this, was attempting to poison the well, exploiting any existing skepticism about Alexander Vance, the embodiment of centralized power and corporate excess, corrupting their decentralized ideals. "They're looking for cracks," Alexander said, his mind working through Marcus's probable thought process. "Any tension points they can exploit. They know this community values ethical conduct, transparency, autonomy. My past is the antithesis of that. Your adoption isn't the scandal they're pushing anymore, not here. Here, it's about whether Alexander Vance, the man who built an empire on hierarchy and control, is compatible with the principles of decentralization. And whether you," he looked at Maya, his gaze steady, "are compromising those principles by aligning with me." This was the insidious nature of Marcus's new attack. It wasn't just about punishing Maya, it was about undermining her standing, creating internal divisions within the network, sowing seeds of doubt about her judgment and Alexander's intentions. The adoption scandal, while externally damaging, was creating an unexpected effect within the network. Sympathy for Maya as a victim of the old world's cruelty. But Marcus's new campaign leveraged a different vector, the core ideological purity of the decentralized movement. One particularly crucial node in their network was a collective of brilliant cryptographers and data security experts who had developed the unbreakable encryption and secure routing protocols that formed the backbone of Alexander and Maya's parallel infrastructure. Their leader, a fiercely independent woman named Anya, communicated with Maya frequently and held significant sway within this vital part of the ecosystem. Blackwood, digging into Anya's life, discovered a complex web of personal and professional vulnerabilities that Marcus wasted no time exploiting, applying legal pressure, spreading rumors about her prior work, even threatening to expose sensitive personal information gathered through intrusive surveillance. Anya reached out to Maya, not with fear, but with guarded concern. "Maya, questions are being asked," she stated via an encrypted call, her voice tight, "about the source of funding for recent projects utilizing our protocols, about affiliations, there's pressure, and whispers about Alexander, his past, his methods. Some are worried that bringing him into the network risks compromising our principles, that he's trying to take control, centralize." Maya felt a knot tighten in her stomach. This was the direct hit. The trust she had spent years building, piece by careful piece, wasn't just facing external attack. It was facing internal questioning, fueled by Marcus's calculated manipulation of existing tensions within the community. She understood the concerns. Alexander's history was difficult to reconcile with the decentralized ethos. But she also knew the truth of their partnership, forged not in boardrooms, but in shared challenges and mutual respect precisely because Alexander had been forced to shed the trappings of his old power and learn to value a different kind of strength. "Anya, the funding comes from ethical channels, established outside traditional finance," Maya explained, her voice calm, reassuring. "Alexander is not trying to control the network. He's learning from it, leveraging its strengths. He understands the value of decentralization because he's seen the fragility of centralized power. This pressure, these rumors, this is Marcus Thorne. He can't fight our system, so he's trying to break our connections, to make us distrust each other." "We hear his name," Anya replied, hesitation in her tone. "He's attacking us indirectly, making our lives difficult, and the scandal around your past. While many see through the media's narrative, it still raises questions for some about judgment, about who we allow into the core." Maya's heart ached. This wasn't just business. It was personal, striking at the heart of her belonging, her identity within this community that had given her purpose and connection away from the shallowness of the sterling world. But she didn't falter. "Anya, you know me," she said firmly. "You know I wouldn't compromise our principles. Alexander supports building a more resilient, transparent future. He provides the leverage, the strategic insight from the old world to help us build faster, more effectively, against the established powers. We're not hiding, we're operating beneath their radar, building the alternative while they cling to the past." Alexander, listening in, saw the immense pressure Maya was under. The public scandal was a shield. This targeted attack was the real battleground, one fought for loyalty and trust within a community that didn't operate by his old rules. His presence, while providing resources and strategic direction, was also a point of vulnerability for Maya within this delicate ecosystem. He had to act carefully, supporting Maya without inadvertently confirming Marcus's narrative that he was a wolf in decentralized clothing. "They're mapping the network through the pressure points," Alexander noted to Maya later, reviewing the reports. "Identifying the critical connections by seeing who they can lean on. We need countermeasures that aren't aggressive, not a head-on defense that confirms we're a centralized threat. We need to reinforce the autonomy of the nodes, make the network more resilient to external pressure." Their countermeasures were subtle, mirroring the nature of their network. They provided discreet legal and technical support to targeted individuals. They strengthened internal security protocols, emphasizing peer-to-peer verification and distributed trust models, making any potential infiltration or manipulation exponentially more difficult. They initiated educational campaigns within the network, fostering deeper understanding of decentralized principles and the tactics the old world might use to disrupt them, subtly framing Marcus's actions as predictable attempts by centralized power to suppress emergent alternatives. Maya leveraged her deep relationships, relying on the genuine trust she had earned to counter the disinformation and pressure. She was transparent with the network about the personal attacks against her, framing them not as a source of shame, but as proof that their collective efforts were threatening the old order. The battle became a test of wills and ideologies, Marcus applying pressure from the outside, seeking to crack the network through its human elements. Alexander and Maya reinforcing the network from within, strengthening its inherent resilience and the trust among its members. Blackwood's reports to Marcus detailed the countermoves, the increased security, the surprising solidarity within the network. "They're anticipating our moves, Mr. Thorne. Not with firewalls and anti-malware, but with social engineering and protocol reinforcement. And Ms. Sterling, she's incredibly effective at damage control within that community. They seem to trust her over any external pressure or rumors." Marcus grew increasingly frustrated. His conventional tactics weren't working. He couldn't buy their loyalty, couldn't intimidate them effectively, couldn't even reliably disrupt their communications. The more pressure he applied, the more the network seemed to coalesce, seeing his actions as validation of their need for decentralized autonomy. And the adoption scandal, while still a public spectacle, began to generate a counter-narrative of resilience for Maya, the orphaned child who built her own identity, only to have it weaponized by powerful, cruel figures. The public saw drama. The network saw a stark contrast between the ethics of the old world and their own aspirations. "There has to be a weakness," Marcus insisted, reviewing Blackwood's latest report, which detailed the network's frustrating resilience. "Every system has one. Every person has one. Their strength is their decentralization, their distributed nature," Blackwood stated. "There's no single point of failure we can target the way you would a corporate headquarters or a central server farm. Their vulnerability lies in their core principles, in the potential for internal ideological conflict, for a perceived breach of trust from within. If Alexander Vance is seen as trying to centralize power, if Maya Sterling is seen as enabling him, that could cause a schism the network might not recover from." Marcus seized on the idea. "Then make them see it," he ordered. "Amplify any dissent. Seed doubts. Frame Alexander Vance's return, his resources, his relationship with Maya, not as innovation, but as a hostile takeover of the decentralized movement itself. Use their own language, their own values, against them. Drive a wedge between Maya and the network itself." The new wave of targeted pressure focused on amplifying existing concerns within the network about Alexander's past and intentions. Anonymous manifestos appeared in online forums frequented by network members, posing questions about Alexander's compatibility with decentralized ideals. Concerns about the source of funding for large-scale projects were subtly exaggerated. The narrative wasn't that Maya was deceitful, but that she was perhaps naive, blinded by personal loyalty to Alexander, risking the purity and integrity of the network by integrating a figure who represented everything they sought to escape. This attack landed closer to home for Maya. It wasn't just her past being attacked, or her friends pressured. It was the very foundation of the future she was trying to build being questioned from within, her judgment doubted by the community she felt a deep connection to. It was isolating, even with Alexander's support. She had spent years earning their trust, quietly contributing, demonstrating her commitment to their shared ideals. Now that trust was being systematically eroded by doubt and suspicion originating from the old world she had left behind. "They're hitting the core now," Maya said, her voice strained, showing the toll the relentless pressure was taking. "The doubt is spreading, Questions are being raised in the forums, in private channels. Is Alexander using us? Is he the centralized power trying to co-opt the decentralized future? Alexander saw the pain in her eyes, the weariness. They had anticipated external attacks, public opinion battles. They had even anticipated Blackwood figuring out the network's existence. But this pressure, leveraging the internal values and potential conflicts of the network itself, was a more insidious Jan Shu. "We fight it the way this network fights," Alexander stated firmly, stepping closer to her. "With transparency, with truth. We demonstrate through our actions that our goals align with the network's principles. We confront the doubts directly. We show them that the real threat isn't decentralization, or even Alexander Vance. It's centralized power desperately trying to maintain control by spreading fear and mistrust." The coming days would be crucial. Maya had to reaffirm her commitment to the network, reassure its members, and rally support against the internal doubts being sown by Marcus. Alexander had to demonstrate that his resources and strategic thinking were there to support, not supplant, the network's decentralized ethos. The subtle war for influence had escalated into a battle for the hearts and minds of the network members themselves, wagering on whether trust and shared ideals could withstand the relentless, targeted application of fear, doubt, and division orchestrated by the man who had tried to break Alexander at the altar and was now trying to break Maya within the very community she had helped build in the shadows. The fate of two empires, one old and one emergent, hung on the outcome of this invisible war for loyalty and belief, and Maya Sterling, the quiet sister, unexpectedly stood at its epicenter, her resilience tested not by public scandal, but by the threat of losing the very community that had become her true family. The pressure on the decentralized network intensified, a calculated campaign orchestrated by Marcus Thorne to exploit the ideological fault lines within the community Alexander and Maya were now deeply embedded in. Anonymous communications, subtly amplified through compromised channels, raised doubts about Alexander's true motives. Forums buzzed with debates about whether the network was being co-opted by a symbol of the centralized power it sought to escape. Was Alexander Vance, the man who built his fortune on ruthless control, genuinely committed to decentralized principles, or was this just a sophisticated, long-con hostile takeover? Was Maya Sterling, the woman with the newly exposed secret identity and deep personal ties to the old world, a trusted partner or a Trojan horse, blinded by loyalty or perhaps even complicity? Maya fielded calls and messages, her voice calm but firm, addressing anxieties, reaffirming her commitment to the network's principles. It was emotionally draining, forcing her to constantly articulate her beliefs, her journey, her trust in Alexander, against a tide of manufactured suspicion. She chose radical transparency, speaking openly in trusted channels about her adoption, the pain of its exposure, and how that very experience had shown her the value of building connections based on mutual respect and shared purpose, rather than inherited names or public facades. Alexander, advised by Maya, made his own calculated moves within the network. He didn't deliver sweeping speeches or make grand promises. Instead, he quietly provided solutions to technical challenges the network faced, offering resources, not capital, but access to specialized data, secure infrastructure, strategic insights, in ways that reinforced the network's autonomy, demonstrating his value as a contributor, not a controller. He helped optimize protocols, enhance security against external pressures, and offered strategic foresight learned from decades navigating the high-stakes world Marcus inhabited, applying that knowledge not to dominate, but to advise the network on how to counter such threats while maintaining its integrity. Silas Blackwood watched, fascinated and increasingly uneasy. His job was to dismantle, but he was witnessing something complex and arguably resilient. Marcus was pushing for a decisive blow, demanding Blackwood find a way to either discredit Maya irrevocably within the network or introduce a catastrophic failure into the system. But Blackwood had come to respect the intricate balance of this decentralized ecosystem, the very thing that made it so hard to attack conventionally. He saw Maya's genuine anguish at the forced transparency, but also her quiet strength, her unwavering dedication to the network members who had become her chosen family. He saw Alexander, the feared titan, operating not with force, but with a surprising deference to the community's consensus and a focus on contributing valuable resources rather than issuing directives. "Mr. Thorne," Blackwood reported, his tone less assertive than usual. "The internal pressure is causing debate, but it's not fracturing the network the way we anticipated. Ms. Sterling is effective. She's addressing concerns directly, leveraging the trust she built over years, and Vance is demonstrating value in ways that resonate with their principles, not contradicting them. He's acting more like a strategic advisor or patron, not a hostile buyer. For many within the network, this external pressure from us is only reinforcing their belief that what they're building is a threat to the established order, and thus, necessary." Marcus paced the room, his frustration mounting. All his levers were failing. Public scandal for Maya, while painful, wasn't stopping their operations or fracturing their network. Economic pressure on their affiliated conventional businesses was causing disruption, but the core network, the engine of their new power, seemed immune or able to rote around it. And now, his attempts to sow internal discord were being actively countered by Maya's unexpected resilience and Alexander's careful navigation. "There has to be a point of failure," Marcus repeated, his voice dangerously strained. Isabella watched him, her own carefully constructed composure starting to fray. The legal fallout from the adoption leak was causing significant problems for her father's campaign, and the public image she and Marcus had so carefully cultivated was becoming increasingly shadowed by accusations of cruelty and desperation. "There is one significant vulnerability, sir," Blackwood admitted, looking uneasy. "Not in their network, but in yours. In Thorne Enterprises. My investigation into their activities led me to look at your own infrastructure, specifically how dependent Thorne Enterprises has become on critical yet often overlooked, decentralized components. Things like secure identity verification protocols, autonomous contract execution systems for supply chains, peer-to-peer energy microgrids you integrated for efficiency gains. Many of these utilize protocols developed by or maintained by elements within the very network you're trying to dismantle." Marcus stared at him blankly. "I don't understand. We own the infrastructure." "You own the physical and top-level digital infrastructure, sir," Blackwood clarified, "but the underlying protocols, the foundational software facilitating these complex operations, are often open source or managed by decentralized autonomous organizations, the kind of entities Maya Sterling has deep ties to. You built your efficiency and security on their ecosystem without realizing it. Alexander and Maya haven't built a system to replace yours externally. They've built one that can exist within yours, leverage its components differently, and even redirect them. They understand the roots of your infrastructure in a way your own teams don't, because your teams were focused on integration and scale, not the underlying principles." He paused, letting the gravity of the situation sink in. "The ultimate leverage point isn't capturing their network, sir. It's that they can demonstrate control over your network's foundational elements. They exposed your reliance on components you don't fully control by causing those untraceable disruptions. They weren't attacking you. They were mapping the dependencies, showing their network's ability to interact with yours at a fundamental level. And my guess is they're ready to prove it definitively." The chilling realization hit Marcus with full force. He hadn't just built his empire on Alexander's perceived ruin. He had inadvertently built crucial parts of it on the very foundations Alexander and Maya were now controlling. His efficiency gains, his cost savings, his secure transactions, much of it relied on the underlying technologies of the decentralized world Maya inhabited. They didn't need to destroy Thorn Enterprises. They only needed to demonstrate that they held the keys to significant portions of its operational core. That evening, while the public was still buzzing about Maya Sterling's scandalous past and Senator Sterling tried desperately to do damage control, Alexander Vance and Maya Sterling made their final move. Not on a trading floor, not in a courtroom, but through a series of coordinated, non-destructive actions across the critical infrastructure Blackwood had identified. It wasn't an attack designed to crash systems or steal data. It was a highly visible, undeniable demonstration of their network's capability to control or override specific functions within Thorn Enterprises' infrastructure and its closely linked allies. Across the city and across the globe, in facilities linked to Marcus Thorn's empire, things started to happen. Automated factory floors paused, then resumed, but under slightly altered, less efficient parameters dictated by an unseen command. Complex, multi-party contracts involving Thorn Enterprises, which relied on autonomous execution protocols, suddenly required manual, verifiable confirmations from every party, overriding Thorn's automated systems, creating delays and financial uncertainty. Energy flows to specific non-essential Thorn assets were temporarily rerouted to local community grids, demonstrating a capability to prioritize alternative networks over Thorn's interests. It was precise, targeted, limited, and undeniably happening on a level Alexander and Maya controlled. Crucially, alongside these technical demonstrations, a carefully curated, anonymized report began circulating quietly within financial analysis firms, regulatory bodies, and key investment groups. This report, compiled by Alexander and Maya, likely with contributions from trusted members of their network, didn't claim malicious attack. Instead, it detailed inherent vulnerabilities and dependencies within Thorn Enterprises' digital infrastructure, demonstrating how critical operational functions relied on often open-source, decentralized protocols and warning of the potential for systemic risk due to this unacknowledged reliance on components outside the company's direct control. It outlined, with cold, irrefutable logic and data, exactly what Alexander and Maya were demonstrating in real time: that Thorn's empire, for all its outward show of strength, was built on foundations that were, from a decentralized perspective, inherently fragile and externally steerable. Marcus Thorn watched the screens in his office, the operational reports flooding in, each one detailing another inexplicable malfunction, another overridden process, another critical dependency exposed. His technical teams were in panic mode, but they couldn't stop what was happening because they didn't understand its source or its nature. It wasn't hacking, it was control. Control from the outside in, from the bottom up. Then, Marcus and Isabella received an encrypted message. Not a demand, not a threat, just a simple data file attachment. Opening it, they saw a live feed from one of their most critical automated logistics hubs. On a screen visible in the feed, which normally displayed Thorn Enterprises' proprietary operational dashboards, raw data streams were now showing complex visual representations of networks. Not Thorn's internal network, but the decentralized network. And overlaid on the feed, a single line of text appeared, looping, "The ghost did not hide. He rebuilt the foundation you built upon, and the quiet sister showed him the way." Below the text, a single simple contract appeared on the screen, a smart contract written in code, proposing to restore Marcus's systems to full functionality and offering ongoing support to transition Thorn Enterprises away from its unstable dependencies on decentralized protocols it didn't understand. The cost, not money, but full, undisputed control of all Vance Industries assets Marcus had absorbed, transferred back to Alexander Vance, and a complete public withdrawal of any and all legal actions, public statements, or pressure campaigns against Maya Sterling and her associates, along with a public apology to Maya from both Marcus and Isabella for the dissemination of her personal history. An exchange of power, not for vengeance but for stability and control. A choice: cling to a compromised empire built on lies and dependencies, or relinquish ill-gotten gains for the chance to operate securely, albeit diminished, within the old world. The network had shown its hand, not to destroy but to dictate terms, leveraging its unseen power. Marcus stared at the screen, his face pale. He wasn't facing financial ruin, not immediately, but total operational paralysis, exposed dependencies, and investor panic were imminent if he couldn't regain control. Alexander wasn't just taking back Vance Industries, he was demonstrating that Marcus's empire, for all its size, was fundamentally compromised, built on layers of technology he didn't truly understand or control. And Maya Sterling, the quiet researcher, had been the architect of this elegant, devastating counter-move. She hadn't needed to be loud or aggressive. Her strength lay in seeing the hidden systems, in building connections outside the established order, in understanding the true power of decentralization against centralized fragility. Isabella, seeing the defeat in Marcus's eyes, finally understood the depth of her failure. She had tried to destroy Alexander Vance with public humiliation and ruthless business tactics. She had tried to break her sister with personal scandal, but she had been fighting the wrong war. Alexander hadn't sought vengeance in the way she understood it. He had sought to build something stronger, more resilient, and more aligned with principles beyond greed and control. And Maya, the sister she had always dismissed, had found her power not in the glamorous world Isabella craved, but in the quiet spaces, in the networks she had helped build, becoming the indispensable partner to the man Isabella thought she had ruined. Defeated, cornered by an enemy he couldn't fight on his own terms, Marcus Thorne had no choice. He instructed his legal team to accept the terms of the smart contract, which executed itself across secure channels, transferring assets with disarming speed, overriding previous legal ownership records with the undeniable authority of the network's verified protocols. The public apology, however humiliating, was a non-negotiable condition, broadcast through channels Marcus and Isabella were forced to provide access to, acknowledging the harm caused by their actions towards Maya. Vance Industries was Alexander's again, transferred not through hostile takeover in a boardroom, but through a decisive demonstration of a new form of power, executed within the digital foundations of the old world. With their objective achieved, Alexander and Maya didn't stay to rebuild Vance Industries in the old image. They had built something new, something beyond the confines of traditional corporate structures. They transitioned leadership of Vance Industries to a team of ethical innovators chosen from within their trusted network, people committed to leveraging the company's resources for ventures aligned with their decentralized principles. They ensured the public records were updated, the legal transfers finalized, the apology delivered. Then, as quietly as they had arrived at the gala, they left the city. Not in defeat or hiding, but moving towards the next phase of their work. The apartment was vacated, leaving no trace. The public scandal around Maya's adoption gradually faded, replaced by whispers of her unexpected power and resilience. Marcus Thorne's empire, though not entirely destroyed, was significantly weakened, its dependencies exposed, its aura of invincibility shattered. Isabella Sterling, linked to the public apology and the fallout from her father's campaign, faced the consequences of her own ruthlessness, her position in society irrevocably altered. Alexander Vance, the ghost, was gone again, but this time he left behind not ruin, but the first tremors of a new kind of power, an ecosystem built in the shadows, poised to challenge the old order. And by his side, not in his shadow but walking with him, was Maya Sterling, the quiet sister, who had found her voice, her strength, and her purpose in the most unexpected place, proving that true power often resides not in the spotlight, but in the unseen connections, in the resilience forged in quiet spaces, and in the courage to build a new future on foundations of trust and shared principles, far from the gilded cages of the past. Their journey had just begun, moving towards the next horizon, guided by the stars of a decentralized future leaving the echoes of a dismantled empire behind. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.